Welcome back to Cinema Decoder X. Today, we're diving into a fascinating TV series called Monster. Released in 2022, this film has been creating quite a buzz among movie lovers everywhere. If you loved this breakdown, hit that subscribe button, join the Decoder X community, and let's keep the conversation going, so you never miss our latest movie breakdowns and honest reviews. Now, let's get started.
Friends, if you want to watch the super hit movie Monster 2022 in English, then make sure to like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more movie breakdowns and reviews. In today's video, we are going to talk about Monster 2022, a gripping thriller that combines emotional storytelling, powerful performances, and technical brilliance. We will explore what this movie is about, where it can be watched, and share some fascinating behind-the-scenes details that make it stand out. I will also guide you through the technical departments, including music, cinematography, and editing, as well as cover the film's production journey from pre-production to post-production. By the end, you will have a clear understanding of Monster 2022, including its story, cast, box office success, and overall impact. Monster 2022 is a Japanese psychological drama film directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, a filmmaker known for his sensitive storytelling and deep exploration of human emotions. The movie centers on the lives of a mother, her young son, and his teacher, weaving their perspectives together to reveal a powerful truth about misunderstanding, love, and judgment. What begins as a simple school conflict slowly unfolds into a thought-provoking study of empathy and perception. The film challenges audiences to question what they believe and to look deeper before forming opinions about others. This narrative structure, told through shifting points of view, gives Monster 2022 its emotional complexity and resonance. From a production standpoint, Monster 2022 reflects meticulous planning and artistic intent. The pre-production phase involved detailed script development, location scouting, and casting. Koreeda worked closely with screenwriter Yuji Sakamoto to refine the script, ensuring that every line of dialogue and every scene served the emotional core of the story. The film was primarily shot in Japan, with settings that reflect everyday suburban life, a quiet town, a school, and family homes that feel authentic and lived in. The production design reinforces the emotional tone of the film, using natural light and realistic interiors to keep the focus on the characters and their emotions rather than spectacle. Cinematography plays a crucial role in establishing the film's mood. Shot by Ryuto Kondo, the visuals balance intimacy and distance, allowing viewers to feel close to the characters while maintaining a sense of mystery. The camera work is subtle but deliberate, often lingering on faces or small gestures that reveal hidden emotions. The lighting design uses soft, natural tones to capture the quiet sadness and beauty of everyday life. This restrained visual style is a hallmark of Koreeda's direction and contributes to the film's emotional depth. Music is another essential aspect of Monster 2022. The score, composed by the late Ryuichi Sakamoto, adds a haunting and melancholic atmosphere. His music complements the film's themes of confusion, love, and discovery, using gentle piano and ambient sounds to express emotions that words cannot. The soundtrack enhances the storytelling without overpowering it, making the emotional moments more poignant. During the filming process, the director emphasized authenticity and natural performances. Koreeda is known for creating a relaxed environment on set, allowing actors, especially children, to respond naturally rather than follow rigid instructions. This approach results in deeply genuine performances, particularly from the young actor portraying Minato, whose emotional journey drives much of the story. The interactions between the mother, played by Sakura Ando, and her son feel heartfelt and real, grounding the film's emotional stakes. In post-production, the editing was handled with great precision to ensure that the multi-perspective storytelling remained clear and impactful. Each narrative segment gradually overlaps with the others, revealing new insights and reinterpreting earlier events. This structure keeps the audience engaged and reflective, as they piece together the full picture of what truly happened. The sound design is equally important, using silence and ambient noise to heighten tension and create emotional contrast. As for the budget and box office, Monster 2022 was produced with a moderate budget typical for a Japanese drama but achieved strong international success. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, where it received critical acclaim and earned the Best Screenplay Award for Yuji Sakamoto. The film's universal themes and emotional storytelling helped it connect with audiences beyond Japan, leading to impressive box office returns and festival screenings worldwide. The performances in Monster 2022 are among its strongest elements. Sakura Ando delivers a moving portrayal of a mother caught between fear and hope, while Ida Nagayama as the teacher brings quiet intensity and vulnerability. The young actors bring authenticity and emotional truth that carry the story's weight. Together, the cast creates a believable and affecting dynamic that resonates long after the film ends. In conclusion, Monster 2022 is not just a movie about conflict or misunderstanding, it is a reflection on the complexity of human emotion and perception. Its carefully constructed narrative, subtle cinematography, evocative music, and deeply human performances make it one of the most memorable films of its year. Whether you appreciate emotional storytelling or thoughtful drama, Monster 2022 offers a rich and moving cinematic experience. Be sure to watch this video till the end and share your thoughts in the comments. Monster is a tightly wound psychological drama directed by Hirokazu Koreeda with a screenplay by Yuji Sakamoto that revolves around a small cast of characters whose lives are appended by accusation, secrecy, and the fragile inner world of children. The film centers on Saori Mugino, played by Sakura Ando, and her fifth-grade son Minato, portrayed by Soya Kurakawa. When Minato begins showing strange behaviors and emotional distress, Saori becomes convinced that something terrible has happened to him. Her suspicions lead her to his homeroom teacher, Michitoshi Hori, played by Ida Nagayama, whom she accuses of mistreating her son. At first, the story seems straightforward, a protective mother confronting an abusive teacher, but as the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that the truth is far more complex. The first act of the film is told from Saori's perspective. She notices her son acting withdrawn, coming home late, and sporting unexplained injuries. When Minato finally blurts out that his teacher called him a monster, Saori immediately assumes Hori is verbally and physically abusing her child. She storms into the school demanding justice, but the administrators downplay her concerns. Tension escalates as Saori's anger grows, and soon, the local community turns against Hori. He is suspended from his job, humiliated in public, and treated as guilty before any real evidence is found. Koreeda uses this first act to build empathy for Saori, while subtly hinting that her perspective may not be entirely reliable. The film then rewinds and retells the same events from Hori's point of view. In his version, Hori is a gentle and caring teacher struggling to manage a class filled with emotional tension. He notices the close friendship between Minato and another student, Yori Mugino, played by Hinata Hiragi. Their bond seems innocent at first, but rumors begin to spread among the students, turning them into targets of bullying. Hori's efforts to protect them are misunderstood by adults, especially Saori, who interprets his behavior as suspicious. This second perspective transforms the narrative entirely. What once seemed like abuse now appears as a tragic miscommunication. Hori's interactions with the boys, though awkward and constrained by school policy, come from compassion rather than cruelty. The third and final act retells the story from Minato's perspective, revealing the deepest emotional truths hidden beneath the adult conflict. Through his eyes, the audience learns that his connection with Yori is one of pure empathy and affection. Yori is a quiet, withdrawn boy who lives with his father, played by Shido Nakamura, a man who struggles to understand his son's gentle nature. The two boys share secret moments in the woods and near an abandoned train tunnel, where they build a small refuge away from judgment. When Minato's behavior becomes erratic, it is not because of abuse from Hori but because of the confusion and shame he feels about his friendship with Yori. Koreeda portrays these scenes with tenderness, never sensationalizing the children's emotions but instead allowing their innocence and fear to speak for themselves. When the film's three perspectives finally converge, the audience realizes that no one was truly the monster. The real tragedy lies in misunderstanding and the failure of adults to see the emotional truth of children's experiences. Saori's love for her son is fierce but clouded by fear, Hori's compassion is genuine but misinterpreted, and Minato's longing for connection becomes twisted by gossip and adult projections. In the end, the film's title Monster refers not to a person but to the way society labels and isolates those who do not conform to its expectations. The supporting performances enhance the emotional depth of the story. Yuko Tanaka delivers a powerful performance as the school principal, a woman burdened by guilt and indecision who tries to protect the school's reputation while ignoring the truth. Shido Nakamura as Yori's father embodies the generational divide between parents and children, unable to express love in a way his son understands. The ensemble cast's naturalistic performances give the film an authenticity that makes its emotional revelations even more powerful. Visually, the film maintains Koreeda's signature realism. The cinematography by Ryuto Kondo uses soft natural lighting to highlight the emotional fragility of its characters. The score by the late Ryuichi Sakamoto is haunting and understated, using delicate piano and ambient tones to echo the story's themes of isolation, confusion, and understanding. The final scenes, set near the boys' secret hideout during a storm, serve as a visual metaphor for catharsis and rebirth. By the conclusion, Monster reveals itself not as a film about crime or punishment, but as an exploration of perception, empathy, and the quiet ways misunderstanding can destroy lives. Through its layered storytelling, emotional performances, and careful craftsmanship, Monster 2022 stands as one of Koreeda's most profound works, offering a heartbreaking yet hopeful reflection on human connection. Monster 2022 begins with a sense of quiet unease, opening on a small Japanese town nestled between mountains and rivers. The film wastes no time establishing its emotional tone through subtle visual storytelling. We meet Saori Mugino, a single mother played by Sakura Ando, who lives a modest life with her son Minato, portrayed by Soya Kurikawa. Their relationship is close yet strained, filled with the ordinary tensions of parenting a growing child. The film's opening images, a mother cooking breakfast, a son staring silently out the window, and the distant sound of a school bell, set up an atmosphere of normalcy that will soon unravel. This tranquil beginning is crucial because it grounds the audience before the story takes its darker turn. The inciting incident occurs when Saori begins to notice strange changes in Minato's behavior. He comes home late from school, appears distracted, and even injures himself without explanation. When she gently questions him, he mutters that his teacher, Mr. Hori, called him a monster. This single word triggers Saori's worst fears. Her maternal instincts ignite, and she confronts the school's administration, demanding answers. The principal, played by Yuko Tanaka, gives cautious and evasive responses, implying that the school prefers to keep such issues quiet. Saori's persistence turns the situation public, creating a storm of gossip and suspicion. At this point, the story positions the audience firmly with Saori. We see what she sees, feel her frustration, and assume she is right to suspect foul play. As the rising action unfolds, Koreeda begins to weave subtle doubts into Saori's narrative. Mr. Hori, played by Ita Nagayama, does not behave like a villain. He appears nervous but also compassionate, and his conversations with the school staff suggest confusion rather than guilt. Despite this, the community turns against him, painting him as an abuser. The film skillfully captures how quickly rumor can harden into certainty, and how truth becomes secondary to emotional reaction. This first act builds to an emotional climax when Minato runs away, prompting a frantic search that leaves everyone on edge. The tension peaks as Saori, convinced her son has been driven to despair by Hori, collapses in grief. Then the film rewinds. Koreeda shifts perspective and retells the story from Hori's point of view, marking one of the film's most important narrative pivots. This second act transforms the story into something entirely new. Scenes we thought we understood now appear in a different light. Hori's interactions with Minato were not cruel or abusive, but rather awkward attempts to mediate between students. He witnessed Minato defending another boy, Yori, played by Hinata Hiragi, who was being bullied for being different. Hori tried to protect both boys but found himself entangled in a web of misunderstanding. The moment when Minato claimed he was called a monster is reinterpreted. Hori was quoting the bullies, not labeling Minato himself. This shift redefines the audience's sense of morality and blame. What once seemed like a simple tale of guilt becomes a complex study of miscommunication and perception. The middle section of the film explores Hori's personal struggles. We see his loneliness, his quiet dedication to teaching, and his heartbreak as his reputation collapses. These moments humanize him, showing the cost of being misunderstood. The narrative tension here is emotional rather than sensational. Koreeda uses silence, pauses, and gestures to reveal the pain of isolation. The perspective shift also deepens the film's central question. Who is the real monster? The accused, the accuser, or the society that rushes to judge? As the story progresses, the film enters its third act, retelling events from Minato's perspective. This final narrative layer reveals the truth behind everything we've seen. Minato and Yori's friendship is central to this version. Their bond, innocent yet emotionally intense, becomes a refuge from the cruelty of their classmates and the misunderstanding of adults. The boys share secret hideouts, small gifts, and quiet conversations about what it means to be different. Koreeda portrays these scenes with sensitivity, showing the purity of their emotions without labeling them. The revelation that Minato's turmoil came not from abuse but from confusion and fear reframes the entire film. His declaration that someone called him a monster reflects how society labels difference as something to be feared. The rising emotional tension reaches its peak during the sequence in which Minato disappears into the woods during a storm. Saori, Hori, and the police search frantically, each haunted by guilt. When Minato and Yori are finally found near their secret hideout, drenched and shivering, the emotional release is powerful. Yet Koreeda resists a conventional resolution. Instead, the finale plays out with quiet ambiguity. The boys vanish again, possibly imagined or symbolically freed, leaving the adults to confront their own blindness. The final image, sunlight breaking through clouds over the forest, suggests peace but also loss. Monster's non-linear structure is essential to its impact. By reordering the story through multiple perspectives, Koreeda invites the audience to experience empathy through discovery. Each retelling doesn't merely add information, it transforms the emotional truth of what we think we know. The technique tightens the storytelling while leaving space for interpretation. Key scenes, the mother's confrontation, the teacher's breakdown, the boy's secret refuge, exist not just to advance the plot but to deepen the emotional resonance. The result is a story that feels alive, shifting and expanding in meaning with each viewing. Monster 2022 becomes a masterclass in narrative design, showing that understanding requires more than seeing, it demands listening, patience, and compassion. Character development is the emotional backbone of Monster 2022. While the film's shifting perspectives and layered storytelling make it feel like a mystery, it is ultimately a human drama about perception, empathy, and emotional growth. Each major character, Saori, Minato, Hori, and Yori, undergoes subtle but profound transformation. By the end, all of them emerge changed, not through grand revelations but through quiet moments of realization that force them to see beyond their assumptions. Hirokazu Koreeda's direction ensures that each arc is grounded in truth, allowing the character's emotional evolution to unfold naturally through gesture, silence, and action rather than exposition. Saori Mujino, played by Sakura Ando, is introduced as a loving yet overprotective single mother. She works hard to provide a stable home for her son Minato and takes pride in being attentive to his needs. At the start, her world is built around control. She believes that if she watches closely enough, she can prevent harm from reaching her child. When Minato begins acting withdrawn, her maternal instincts drive her into defensive overdrive. The turning point comes when she hears that her son was called a monster by his teacher. Her reaction is impulsive and emotional. She assumes the worst without seeking full understanding. Saori's journey is shaped by fear, guilt, and a desperate need to protect her son from a world she perceives as cruel. As the story progresses, Saori's certainty crumbles. Through the retelling of events from other perspectives, the audience sees how her determination blinds her to the truth. Her confrontation scenes with the school staff, where she slams her hand on the table demanding justice, illustrate both her strength and her fragility. By the end of the film, Saori's transformation lies in humility. She learns to let go of absolute control and recognize that love requires trust and listening. Her final scenes, where she observes her son with quiet understanding instead of interrogation, demonstrate her emotional growth. She shifts from a mother who reacts to one who reflects, a subtle but powerful evolution. Minato, portrayed by Soya Kurokawa, is the emotional core of the film. At the beginning, he seems like a typical fifth grader, bright, gentle, and sensitive, but as the story unfolds, we discover layers of confusion and loneliness beneath his calm exterior. Minato's inner conflict arises from his friendship with Yori, a relationship that defies the rigid boundaries of his world. When his classmates begin bullying Yori, Minato's loyalty and affection place him in a difficult position. He hides his emotions from his mother, fearing judgment, and this suppression manifests as erratic behavior. The pivotal moment in his character arc comes when he repeats the word monster, internalizing the labels others have thrown at him. Through the final act, told from his perspective, we witness Minato's growing awareness of what it means to be different. His time with Yori, playing by the river, running through the woods, and building their secret refuge, reveals his yearning for connection. The storm scene, where he and Yori hide in the mountains, becomes the culmination of his emotional journey. For the first time, Minato stops running from his feelings and accepts them, even if the world around him cannot. His arc ends not in resolution but in liberation. He learns to define himself beyond the fear and misunderstanding projected onto him. Mr. Hori, portrayed by Ita Nagayama, begins as the film's supposed antagonist. Seen through Saori's eyes, he appears cold and defensive. However, once the story shifts to his perspective, his humanity emerges. Hori is not a villain but a man caught in the moral traps of responsibility and misinterpretation. His caring nature and dedication to his students are overshadowed by a society that thrives on suspicion. The key to his character lies in restraint. His quiet demeanor masks both compassion and vulnerability. His arc is one of endurance. He begins powerless against false accusations and ends wiser but scarred, aware that truth does not always triumph over perception. In a crucial moment near the end, when he encounters Saori again, he responds with empathy rather than bitterness, marking a subtle yet profound change in his outlook. Yori, played by Hinata Hiragi, is the film's most mysterious and symbolic character. From the beginning, Yori is portrayed as fragile and misunderstood. His soft-spoken nature, unusual behavior, and sensitivity make him an easy target for bullying. Yet, through Minato's perspective, we see Yori as a figure of quiet resilience. He teaches Minato what acceptance means, not through words but through shared silence and mutual understanding. The scenes where Yori looks at Minato without speaking reveal a profound emotional intelligence. His presence challenges everyone's definition of normalcy. By the film's conclusion, Yori's character transcends realism. He becomes a symbol of innocence and the cost of being different in a world eager to label outsiders. The supporting characters serve to reinforce the film's thematic depth. The school principal, played by Yuko Tanaka, represents institutional caution and the fear of scandal. Her eventual admission of guilt and remorse humanizes her, showing how silence can be as damaging as action. Yori's father, portrayed by Shido Nakamura, embodies generational misunderstanding. His inability to connect with his son mirrors Saori's struggle, but his guilt becomes a quiet counterpoint to her transformation. Each character in Monster 2022 undergoes change not through dramatic speeches but through emotional honesty. Koreeda uses subtle cues, a lingering glance, a hesitant touch, a moment of silence, to communicate growth. The film's greatest achievement in character development is its refusal to draw clear moral lines. No one is purely right or wrong. Each is both victim and participant in misunderstanding. By the end, the characters have not solved every conflict, but they have learned to see with compassion. In a world quick to label monsters, Monster 2022 reminds us that true change begins with empathy. The performances in Monster 2022 are what give the film its emotional depth and authenticity. Director Hirokazu Koreeda is known for drawing remarkably natural and layered performances from his actors, and this film is no exception. Every actor, from the leads to the smallest supporting roles, contributes to the film's delicate emotional tapestry. The cast operates less like performers hitting dramatic notes and more like real people quietly unraveling before the camera. Each gesture, silence, and look carries weight, making the performances feel lived in rather than staged. Sakura Ando as Saori Mugino delivers one of the most affecting performances of her career. She embodies a single mother torn between love, fear, and confusion with a realism that never feels forced. Ando has an extraordinary ability to express internal turmoil without relying on dialogue. Her facial expressions, particularly in moments when Saori struggles to hide panic or anger, speak louder than words. One standout scene comes when she confronts the school after learning her son has been mistreated. Her controlled fury, mixed with desperation, creates a palpable tension. What makes Ando's performance remarkable is her restraint. She never overplays Saori's emotions, allowing subtle gestures, a trembling hand, a faltering breath, a soft apology, to reveal her character's evolution. In quieter moments, especially toward the end when Saori begins to understand her son's truth, Ando softens her performance, allowing warmth and vulnerability to replace her earlier defensiveness. It's a masterclass in emotional modulation. Soya Kurakawa as Minato is the film's quiet revelation. His performance feels pure and uncalculated, perfectly capturing the confusion and sensitivity of childhood. Kurakawa's portrayal avoids the exaggerated innocence often seen in child performances. Instead, he brings emotional precision to Minato's internal struggle. In early scenes, his awkward body language and downcast eyes communicate his isolation. As the story progresses and we see the world through his perspective, Kurakawa's performance deepens. The way he hesitates before speaking, his fleeting glances at Yori, and his moments of silent rebellion all feel authentic. The emotional climax comes during the mountain scene, where Minato and Yori hide from the world. Kurakawa's tears are not theatrical but deeply human. He captures the feeling of a child confronting emotions too complex to name, and his quiet strength makes those moments devastating. Hinata Hiragi as Yori brings an ethereal quality to the film. His performance is delicate, mysterious, and hauntingly sincere. Yori could have easily been reduced to a victim or symbol, but Hiragi gives him depth and quiet dignity. His voice is soft, but his presence fills every scene. He acts through silence, through the way he looks at Minato, through small gestures like holding onto a piece of paper or hiding behind a curtain. There is a heartbreaking fragility in his eyes that suggests both fear and resilience. One particularly powerful moment occurs when Yori tells Minato that monsters might not be what people think they are. The line, delivered with a faint, trembling honesty, becomes a defining emotional beat in the film. Hiragi's chemistry with Kurakawa feels entirely natural. Their friendship is believable because both young actors play off each other's stillness and vulnerability. Ita Nagayama as Mr. Hori offers one of the film's most nuanced performances. Initially introduced as a cold and possibly abusive teacher, Hori is later revealed as a man misunderstood by both his students and their parents. Nagayama's ability to shift tone without altering his core characterization is what makes his performance so impressive. In early scenes, his clipped speech and rigid posture make him appear antagonistic. However, once the perspective shifts, those same traits take on new meaning. His stiffness becomes nervous restraint, his silence becomes moral exhaustion. A standout moment is when he breaks down privately after being accused, his shoulders trembling as he tries to hold himself together. Nagayama captures the quiet despair of a man who has lost faith in fairness yet still tries to protect his students. His chemistry with Ando in their confrontations is electric. Two wounded adults locked in mutual misunderstanding, both doing their best to defend their truths. Supporting performances in Monster 2022 are just as finely tuned. Yuko Tanaka as the school principal brings a controlled presence that subtly evolves throughout the film. At first, she seems like a bureaucratic figure, but Tanaka plays her hesitation and quiet regret beautifully. Her final scene, where she acknowledges the cost of her inaction, lands with emotional precision because of her understated delivery. Shido Nakamura as Yori's father portrays anger and guilt with equal conviction. His harsh tone and sharp movements early on contrast with the subdued remorse scene later, revealing layers of pain beneath his aggression. His performance underscores the generational inability to express vulnerability, a recurring theme in Koreeda's films. Even minor roles, like Minato's classmates and the school staff, feel real rather than ornamental. Koreeda's direction ensures that every actor understands their emotional purpose in the story. The naturalistic dialogue and camera intimacy help the performers inhabit their roles without pretense. The chemistry between the main cast is especially striking. The interactions between Ando and Kurakawa form the film's emotional foundation. Their scenes together are filled with unspoken tension and eventual reconciliation. Similarly, the connection between Kurakawa and Hiragi captures the innocence and pain of misunderstood friendship. These dynamics are not built through grand speeches but through looks, pauses, and body language. If there's a single reason Monster 2022 resonates so deeply, it is because the performances transform an intricate narrative into something human and immediate. The cast's collective restraint allows emotion to flow organically, drawing the audience into the characters' private worlds. Each actor, whether central or peripheral, understands that truth in this story lies not in declaring emotion but in allowing it to surface quietly. In Monster 2022, performance is not about acting, it's about feeling, and that is what makes every frame come alive. Hirokazu Koreeda's direction in Monster 2022 stands as a masterclass in emotional precision and narrative restraint. Every decision he makes, from framing to pacing, reflects an unshakable confidence in subtlety. Koreeda has built his career exploring the quiet fractures within families and the misunderstandings that shape human relationships, and in Monster, he pushes those themes to a new level. His direction doesn't command attention through spectacle or manipulation. Instead, it draws the viewer in through observation. Koreeda trusts the audience to find meaning in silence, to feel tension in stillness, and to understand emotion in gestures so small they might be missed in a lesser filmmaker's hands. From the opening scenes, his directorial hand establishes the film's tone. The story unfolds slowly, almost hesitantly, mirroring the uncertainty that defines the characters' lives. Koreeda opens with a series of naturalistic shots, a mother calling for her son, a school hallway buzzing with restrained energy, a classroom bathed in muted light. Each image feels deliberate, grounded in a reality that seems uncomfortably familiar. His use of long takes allows moments to breathe, inviting the viewer to look deeper rather than cutting away too soon. This patience is not indulgent, it is purposeful. Koreeda uses stillness to build empathy. By letting scenes play out in real time, he allows us to inhabit the characters' unease and confusion. Koreeda's control over tone is especially impressive. Monster shifts perspectives multiple times, and each shift carries a subtle tonal adjustment. Under a lesser director, these transitions might feel disjointed, but Koreeda handles them with clarity and restraint. He avoids dramatic music cues or overt stylistic changes. Instead, he uses light, framing, and pacing to signal a shift in perspective. In Saori's section, the camera stays close, often following her movements anxiously, creating a sense of claustrophobia that reflects her panic and frustration. When the story moves to the teacher's point of view, the camera steps back slightly, creating a colder, more detached atmosphere. Finally, in the children's perspective, Koreeda's lens becomes freer, the compositions more open, capturing the natural world and the innocence that adults fail to see. Each section feels distinct yet harmoniously connected, unified by Koreeda's delicate visual rhythm. His visual style is deceptively simple but deeply intentional. Koreeda avoids flashy cinematography or rapid editing. He favors natural light, gentle color palettes, and measured camera movements. His preference for long static shots encourages reflection, allowing emotion to emerge organically rather than being imposed. When he does move the camera, it's often slow and purposeful, tracking behind a character walking down a corridor or lingering on a doorway as someone hesitates to enter. This style heightens emotional realism and invites viewers to engage intellectually and emotionally without distraction. The film's visual consistency creates a sense of calm that contrasts with the turmoil beneath the surface, reinforcing one of Koreeda's recurring ideas, that truth and chaos often exist beneath ordinary appearances. Koreeda's handling of actors is another key strength of his direction. He has an uncanny ability to draw nuanced, authentic performances from his cast, especially from children. Instead of instructing them to perform emotion, he allows them to experience it naturally within the environment. His direction fosters trust, and that trust translates to the screen. The scenes between Minato and Yori are filmed with such intimacy that they feel spontaneous, yet they are carefully choreographed to maintain emotional continuity. Likewise, the confrontations between Saori and the teacher feel raw and uncomfortable because Koreeda encourages emotional truth over theatricality. He is less concerned with actors delivering lines than with creating emotional honesty in the moment. Koreeda's direction also demonstrates a keen understanding of narrative structure. Monster's triptych form could easily feel repetitive or confusing, but his disciplined pacing ensures that each segment adds new information and emotional context. He uses repetition not as redundancy, but as revelation. Scenes replay with subtle differences in framing or timing, shifting the audience's understanding of what they're seeing. For instance, a scene that once appeared accusatory becomes sympathetic when seen from another perspective. This structural design, guided by Koreeda's precision, transforms the film from a simple narrative into a moral puzzle about perception, bias, and truth. Music and sound design are integral parts of Koreeda's direction. The score, composed by Ryuichi Sakamoto, is sparse and haunting. Koreeda uses it sparingly, allowing natural sounds, wind, footsteps, rustling fabric, to dominate the soundtrack. When music enters, it does so quietly, amplifying emotional beats rather than dictating them. This restraint mirrors the director's overall philosophy, to let emotion arise naturally rather than forcing it upon the audience. The silence in Monster often speaks louder than words or melodies, turning absence into presence. Koreeda's direction of setting and environment also deserves attention. The film's locations, school corridors, cramped apartments, wooded mountains, become psychological spaces that reflect the characters' inner states. The school, with its clean lines and fluorescent lights, feels oppressive and impersonal. The home is cluttered but intimate, representing safety and suffocation in equal measure. The natural settings, particularly the mountain sequences, offer liberation but also danger. Koreeda orchestrates these spaces as emotional mirrors, showing how environments shape perception and mood. Even his few questionable decisions seem deliberate rather than careless. Some viewers may find the pacing too slow or the emotional restraint too subdued, but these choices align with Koreeda's goal of creating reflection rather than reaction. He is not interested in easy catharsis. Instead, he wants the audience to live with uncertainty, to to feel the discomfort of partial truth. His direction challenges viewers to engage, not consume. In Monster 2022, Hirokazu Koreeda demonstrates what it means for a director to guide every detail without overshadowing the story. His vision is cohesive yet invisible, firm yet gentle. Through patience, control, and empathy, he transforms a complex script into a deeply human experience. Every frame bears his signature: quiet observation, moral complexity, and profound compassion. Monster is not directed to impress, it is directed to understand, and that makes it one of Koreeda's most mature and emotionally resonant works. The cinematography of Monster 2022, crafted by Ryuto Kondo, plays an essential role in shaping the film's emotional landscape and guiding its layered storytelling. Rather than functioning as mere visual decoration, the camera in Monster becomes a quiet narrator, observing, interpreting, and often questioning what it sees. Through careful framing, deliberate lighting, and a restrained color palette, the cinematography reflects the evolving emotional states of the characters and the moral ambiguity at the center of the story. Kondo's visual language complements Hirokazu Koreeda's direction perfectly, grounding the film's complex themes in images that feel intimate, poetic, and hauntingly real. From the opening scenes, Kondo establishes the visual tone through a subdued palette and naturalistic lighting. The early sequences, showing Saori and her son Minato in their apartment, are captured with soft daylight filtering through curtains, creating a muted sense of warmth mixed with melancholy. Shadows are never deep enough to feel oppressive, but always present enough to suggest unease. This balance mirrors the uncertainty that defines Saori's world, a place of love and protection tinged with anxiety. The handheld camera movement enhances the realism, capturing the tension and tenderness of domestic life without stylization. The cinematography doesn't intrude, it witnesses, making the viewer a silent participant in their world. As the film transitions between perspectives, the cinematographic approach evolves subtly. In Saori's section, the camera often stays close to her, using medium and tight framing to trap her within confined spaces. Hallways, door frames, and window reflections create a sense of entrapment, reflecting her growing paranoia as she searches for the truth about her son. The lighting here is intentionally uneven, natural light from outside contrasted with dim indoor sources, visually mirroring the confusion between what is seen and what is assumed. When Saori confronts the school, the composition shifts toward symmetrical shots that emphasize rigidity and institutional control, underlining her sense of helplessness against authority. In the second perspective, focusing on the teacher Hori, the cinematography pulls back slightly. Kondo employs wider shots and steadier camera movement, creating a cooler, more observational tone. The lighting becomes flatter and more neutral, suggesting emotional distance and moral uncertainty. Hori's scenes often feature reflections and glass surfaces, symbolizing the distorted perceptions that drive much of the film's conflict. One of the most striking visual motifs is the repeated use of windows and mirrors to frame characters separately within the same shot, visually reinforcing the film's theme of misunderstanding and fractured viewpoints. When the story shifts to the children's perspective, Kondo allows the camera to breathe. The framing opens up, the lighting grows softer, and the color palette becomes more organic. Natural greens, blues, and earth tones dominate the outdoor scenes, particularly in the forest sequences. These moments are filmed with gentle handheld movement that captures the freedom and wonder of childhood while maintaining an undercurrent of fragility. Wide shots of the children exploring nature evoke both beauty and danger, reminding viewers that innocence and fear coexist. The shift in visual texture from confined interiors to expansive landscapes reflects the emotional liberation that comes with understanding the truth, while also suggesting that clarity often arrives only through vulnerability. Kondo's use of light throughout Monster is both symbolic and practical. The interplay between natural and artificial light defines the shifting emotional tone. In the school scenes, fluorescent lights wash out color, creating a sterile, oppressive mood. In contrast, domestic spaces are lit with softer practical sources, lamps, window light, candles, that create intimacy and human warmth. The final act of the film, particularly the sequences near the mountain and tunnel, uses diffused morning light to evoke renewal. This progression from artificial harshness to natural luminosity parallels the character's journey from confusion to fragile understanding. The cinematography, therefore, doesn't just illuminate the world, it charts emotional transformation. Framing is another key element of Kondo's approach. He often uses negative space to express loneliness or miscommunication. Characters are framed at the edges of the screen, leaving empty backgrounds that emphasize emotional distance. Conversations are frequently filmed with one character slightly out of focus, reminding us that even when people speak, they may not truly connect. Yet in moments of revelation or emotional intimacy, the framing tightens, drawing characters closer together within the same space. This gradual shift from isolation to connection is one of the most subtle but powerful aspects of the cinematography. Kondo's choice of camera movement enhances the emotional realism of the film. Instead of relying on dramatic tracking shots or sweeping pans, he favors quiet motion that feels organic to the character's actions. A handheld shot following Minato as he walks alone through the city captures vulnerability and disorientation. Slow dolly-ins during key conversations create emotional gravity without overt manipulation. When movement does accelerate, such as during moments of panic or confrontation, it feels jarring precisely because the rest of the film is so controlled. This contrast gives those brief moments of chaos real impact. Color also plays a vital narrative role. The film begins in tones of beige, gray, and pale blue, evoking emotional uncertainty. As tension grows, the palette cools to steely grays and washed-out blues, reflecting alienation and fear. Only in the children's section do warmer colors reappear, muted greens and golds that symbolize clarity and connection. The final scenes restore balance through soft natural light, suggesting healing rather than resolution. This careful modulation of color mirrors the shifting truths of the story, guiding the viewer emotionally without drawing attention to itself. Kondo's cinematography stands out not because it demands attention, but because it understands restraint. Every shot serves the emotional core of the story. Nothing is ornamental or excessive. The most memorable visuals, a mother standing in half shadow, a child framed by sunlight through trees, two friends walking across a flooded plain, linger not for their beauty alone but for their emotional honesty. In Monster 2022, Ryuto Kondo transforms simplicity into power. His cinematography does not decorate Koreeda's narrative, it deepens it. Through careful composition, lighting, and movement, he makes the invisible visible, the unspoken fears, misunderstandings, and quiet acts of grace that define human connection. Each frame feels alive with empathy and restraint, ensuring that Monster's visual storytelling remains as emotionally profound as its themes. The editing and pacing of Monster 2022, overseen by director Hirokazu Koreeda alongside editor Koreeda himself with precision and patience, are central to how the film's story unfolds and how its tension builds. Monster is a film that relies heavily on perception and reinterpretation, and the editing mirrors this theme by constantly reshaping our understanding of events. Rather than relying on fast cuts or conventional rhythms, the editing in Monster prioritizes emotional flow and narrative clarity through restraint. Every transition, every pause, and every moment of silence has purpose. The result is a film that feels deliberate and reflective, guiding viewers through layers of misunderstanding until truth and empathy finally emerge. From the opening act, the pacing signals that this is not a film in a hurry. Koreeda allows scenes to breathe, favoring longer takes that linger on characters' faces and environments. The editing here builds an atmosphere of everyday realism, letting time unfold naturally rather than compressing it for efficiency. Early sequences, such as Saori interacting with her son Minato or confronting teachers at the school, unfold in a near-documentary rhythm. This pacing emphasizes the mundane before the emotional storm hits. The lack of quick cuts gives the audience space to observe, to listen, and to question, exactly what the film's narrative demands. Transitions between scenes are often smooth and understated. Koreeda avoids flashy dissolves or hard cuts, instead favoring continuity through sound and emotion. For instance, a conversation might end on a quiet pause, and the next scene begins with a similar tone or sound cue, maintaining emotional consistency. This seamless flow contributes to the film's immersive quality, where time feels fluid and interconnected. The editing mirrors memory itself. Moments drift into one another, blurring the line between past and present. One of the most distinctive aspects of Monster's editing is its triptych structure. The film retells key events from three perspectives: Saori's, the teacher's, and the children's. Each retelling recontextualizes what came before, demanding careful editorial control to balance repetition with revelation. The editing in these transitions is masterful, using small variations in rhythm and shot duration to subtly shift tone and meaning. A scene that initially appears tense and accusatory gains new gentleness when revisited from another viewpoint. Koreeda and his editor ensure that these repetitions never feel redundant by adjusting timing and visual emphasis. For example, when a particular confrontation reappears, the camera might hold longer on a silent reaction or cut earlier to avoid over-explaining. This editorial precision keeps the audience engaged, encouraging them to piece together truth through nuance. The pacing across acts evolves intentionally. The first act is slow and tense, mirroring Saori's confusion and desperation as she tries to protect her son. The rhythm here builds unease through stillness, pauses in dialogue, lingering shots on empty spaces, and moments of silence that feel heavy with implication. In contrast, the second act quickens slightly as the teacher's perspective introduces new information. Cross-cutting between his memories and present moments creates an investigative rhythm, reflecting the audience's shifting perception of guilt and innocence. By the time the third act arrives, the children's viewpoint, the pacing loosens once again, adopting a more natural, fluid tempo. The editing allows scenes to flow freely, matching the innocence and emotional honesty of the children's world. This structural rhythm gives the film a cyclical quality, reinforcing the theme of misunderstanding gradually resolving into clarity. Flashbacks and cross-cutting are used sparingly but effectively. Koreeda prefers continuity of emotion over chronology, allowing memory to surface organically within scenes. Flashbacks are often triggered by sensory details, a sound, a gesture, a glance, rather than by overt transitions. The editing treats memory as a living presence, not a device. This technique avoids confusion and deepens the film's emotional resonance. In moments where multiple perspectives overlap, cross-cutting builds tension without manipulation. The audience is guided through multiple truths, never forced toward a single interpretation. This delicate balance between structure and ambiguity is one of the film's greatest editorial achievements. Silence plays a crucial role in Monster's rhythm. Koreeda's editing trusts quiet moments to carry emotional weight without the need for rapid cutting or excessive score. Pauses between lines are left intact, allowing tension to linger. Scenes often end on silence rather than resolution, reflecting the film's thematic interest in the spaces between understanding. In an era of fast-paced editing, this restraint feels radical. By resisting the urge to rush, the film amplifies emotion through stillness. The absence of sound becomes its own kind of heartbeat, shaping the viewer's breathing and focus. That said, the film's deliberate pacing can be challenging for audiences expecting conventional thriller momentum. There are stretches, particularly in the first act, where the rhythm feels almost stagnant. But this slowness serves a purpose. It immerses viewers in Saori's frustration and confusion, mirroring her sense of powerlessness. When the narrative eventually opens up in later acts, the contrast feels earned. The payoff of emotional clarity depends on this earlier patience. Editing also plays a key role in emphasizing perspective and moral ambiguity. Scenes that appear to condemn one character are later reframed through subtle editorial changes, different camera angles, altered shot durations, or shifted points of focus. The editing transforms accusation into empathy simply by changing what the audience is allowed to see. This approach underscores one of Koreeda's core beliefs, that truth is not fixed but shaped by where we choose to look. The climax of the film showcases how editing can heighten emotion without speed. As Minato and Yori flee into the mountains, the rhythm quickens slightly but remains grounded in observation rather than spectacle. Cuts are motivated by breath and movement, not by action. When the camera finally rests, the stillness becomes devastating. The pacing here turns emotional tension into quiet catharsis. In Monster 2022, editing is not a tool of manipulation but of revelation. Every cut, pause, and transition is designed to mirror human perception, fragmented, emotional, and evolving. The film's rhythm reflects life itself, sometimes slow, sometimes uncertain, often misunderstood, but always moving toward connection. Through careful pacing and invisible craftsmanship, Hirokazu Koreeda transforms editing into an act of empathy, shaping not just how we see the story but how we feel it. The soundtrack and score of Monster 2022 are integral to its emotional architecture, serving not only as accompaniment but as a narrative voice that deepens the film's sense of empathy and mystery. Composed by the late Ryuichi Sakamoto, the music in Monster represents one of his final works, and it carries the grace and emotional intelligence that defined his career. Koreeda's collaboration with Sakamoto results in a score that feels alive yet restrained, haunting yet tender, and ultimately inseparable from the film's exploration of misunderstanding, loss, and human connection. The music does not simply underscore scenes, it listens to them, echoing the emotions that linger beneath the surface of silence. Sakamoto's approach to the score is minimalist and meditative. Rather than dictating how the audience should feel, he creates space for emotion to unfold naturally. The opening theme, introduced with soft piano and distant strings, establishes the tone of quiet unease that runs through the entire film. It is not an overtly melodic or catchy theme but a series of gentle progressions that seem to question themselves, just as the characters do. This motif recurs at key emotional junctures, subtly evolving in tone and instrumentation as the story shifts perspectives. In the beginning, it feels uncertain and fragile, reflecting Saori's confusion and fear. Later, as the narrative opens into the children's point of view, the same theme returns with lighter textures, transforming into something hopeful. Koreeda and Sakamoto share an understanding of silence as a form of music. Throughout Monster, the absence of score is as meaningful as its presence. Many of the most powerful scenes unfold without accompaniment: the mother's confrontation with the teacher, Minato's isolated moments in his room, and the quiet exchanges between the two boys in nature. These silences heighten realism and tension, allowing viewers to feel the weight of unspoken emotion. When music does appear after such stretches of quiet, it lands with greater emotional force. This interplay between silence and sound is one of the most remarkable achievements of the film's auditory design. In the film's first act, the use of music reflects Saori's emotional instability. The cues are sparse and often end abruptly, mirroring her disorientation. Simple piano lines float in and out of scenes, never resolving, suggesting questions rather than answers. Sakamoto uses hesitation as a tool, letting notes hang in the air just long enough to create unease. The sound design complements this by emphasizing everyday noises, the hum of appliances, footsteps in empty hallways, the distant sound of rain. These diegetic sounds become part of the score, blurring the line between the internal and external world. As the perspective shifts to the teacher, the score takes on a cooler, more detached quality. The instrumentation becomes thinner, sometimes replaced entirely by environmental sound. When music does return, it often underscores moments of moral reflection rather than narrative action. For instance, during scenes of the teacher walking alone or sitting in his apartment, the score introduces a low, sustained tone that feels almost like a question. It underscores his isolation and self-doubt without telling the audience how to judge him. This restraint prevents the film from moralizing and instead invites viewers to inhabit his uncertainty. When the story finally turns to the children's perspective, the musical tone undergoes its most profound transformation. The piano becomes lighter, joined by faint woodwinds and strings that evoke both innocence and melancholy. Nature sounds, wind, birds, rustling leaves, blend seamlessly with the music, creating an organic soundscape that mirrors the purity of the boys' friendship. In these sequences, Sakamoto's score feels like an extension of the natural world, breathing with the rhythm of the forest. The music never romanticizes the boys' experiences, but captures the fragile beauty of their understanding. The recurring motif from earlier now sounds less like confusion and more like acceptance, signaling emotional resolution without explicit closure. One of the most striking uses of music occurs during the film's climactic mountain sequence. As Minato and Yori move through the misty landscape, the score emerges almost imperceptibly, soft, ambient tones rising beneath the wind. The gradual swell of strings feels both tragic and transcendent, embodying the film's dual themes of loss and awakening. Sakamoto builds tension not through volume or tempo but through accumulation, layering subtle harmonies until they dissolve into silence. The scene's emotional power lies in its restraint. The music does not overwhelm but gently guides the audience toward catharsis. Koreeda's sound design works hand in hand with Sakamoto's compositions. The director often blends ambient sounds into the score so seamlessly that it becomes difficult to distinguish where one ends and the other begins. This technique creates a continuous sonic texture that mirrors the film's moral fluidity. For instance, the sound of rain might fade into a sustained note, or a door closing might cue the entrance of a piano motif. This blurring of diegetic and non-diegetic sound reinforces the idea that emotion exists everywhere, in environment, memory, and silence alike. The soundtrack's sparseness also ensures that when music finally does assert itself, it feels earned. A standout example is the final sequence, where the recurring piano motif returns in full clarity. The notes are no longer hesitant but confident, suggesting acceptance and release. The cue elevates the scene from quiet reflection to emotional transcendence without ever resorting to melodrama. It's the kind of musical moment that lingers long after the credits roll, a reminder that resolution in Monster is found not in answers but in understanding. If there is any critique to be made, It lies in the near-uniform subtlety of the score. Some viewers might crave more pronounced emotional peaks, particularly in the first act where tension builds slowly. Yet this restraint is deliberate. Koreeda and Sakamoto reject manipulation in favor of authenticity, trusting silence to speak when words and music cannot. Ultimately, the soundtrack and score of Monster 2022 are a masterclass in emotional minimalism. Ryuichi Sakamoto's music, paired with Koreeda's sensitivity to sound, creates a world that breathes, aches, and heals in rhythm with its characters. Every note, every pause, and every whisper of wind becomes part of a larger symphony of human emotion. The score does not tell us how to feel, it reminds us that feeling itself is the story. Monster 2022, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, is a layered meditation on perception, misunderstanding, and the quiet cruelty of human judgment. At its heart, the film explores how truth changes depending on where we stand and how easily empathy can be clouded by fear. Beneath the structure of a mystery, Koreeda builds a profound emotional study about identity, love, and the need to be seen for who we truly are. The story uses a shifting narrative to reveal that what seems monstrous in one light may be innocent in another, and that understanding comes only through compassion. The first and most dominant theme is perception versus reality. The movie's Rashomon-like storytelling reveals how each person's viewpoint alters the truth. What begins as a tale of a mother confronting a teacher over alleged abuse evolves into a commentary on the unreliability of perspective. Each version of events, Saori's, the teacher's, and the children's, feels internally consistent but incomplete. Koreeda shows how truth is fragmented, shaped by emotion and assumption. This idea extends beyond the plot. It's reflected in how the camera observes characters, often through windows, mirrors, or blurred glass, emphasizing partial understanding. The film suggests that reality is never singular, and to judge without seeing the full picture is to create a monster of our own making. Another central theme is the destructive nature of rumor and social pressure. The community in Monster quickly becomes a reflection of modern moral panic, where judgment spreads faster than truth. Once Saori suspects her son's teacher, society amplifies her fear without evidence. The media, school officials, and neighbors all contribute to the hysteria, turning human uncertainty into collective condemnation. Koreeda critiques how systems built to protect, like schools or parent groups, can instead weaponize perception, isolating individuals under the guise of righteousness. This theme feels universal but especially resonant in an age when information spreads instantly, and reputations can collapse in moments. The film also wrestles deeply with the concept of identity, particularly through its children, Minato and Yori. Their bond challenges traditional definitions of friendship and love, exploring how innocence becomes misunderstood by adult frameworks. The boys' relationship, pure and emotionally complex, is misread as something inappropriate by those who project adult anxieties onto it. Koreeda handles this with immense sensitivity, portraying the children's world as a refuge from the judgment and confusion of grown-ups. Their connection becomes a metaphor for authenticity in a society obsessed with appearances. In this sense, the monster is not a person but a society that corrupts innocence through suspicion. Love, too, operates as a redemptive force within the film. Each character's actions, even misguided ones, stem from love, a mother's protectiveness, a teacher's compassion, a child's need for understanding. But Koreeda examines how love can distort when filtered through fear. Saori's love for her son becomes controlling, while Minato's affection for Yori turns into something he must hide. The film argues that love is not inherently pure, it must be accompanied by empathy and trust to avoid becoming destructive. Only when Saori learns to listen rather than assume does love return to its honest form. Guilt and redemption form another emotional backbone of the film. The teacher's storyline is particularly rich in this regard. Accused and humiliated, he becomes a vessel for exploring forgiveness and resilience. His silence, initially read as guilt, later reveals itself as integrity. His refusal to defend himself stems from compassion and understanding of the larger forces at play. This inversion challenges viewers to reconsider how we define morality. Redemption in Monster does not arrive through dramatic confession or punishment but through recognition, through finally seeing one another without distortion. Power dynamics run quietly beneath every interaction in the film. Adults hold institutional and emotional power over children, parents over teachers, society over the individual. Koreeda exposes how power can masquerade as care, and how even well-meaning people perpetuate harm when they prioritize control over understanding. The teacher's vulnerability highlights how fragile authority can become under suspicion, while the children's freedom in the wilderness scenes reveals a world without hierarchy, one that thrives on trust instead of control. The film's title gains meaning through all these themes. Monster becomes a word that shifts depending on who speaks it and when. At various points, the audience might believe the monster is the teacher, the mother, or even the children. By the end, it becomes clear that the real monster is misunderstanding itself, the fear of what we do not take time to know. Koreeda's storytelling invites the viewer to move beyond judgment and into empathy, transforming the idea of monstrosity into a reflection of human blindness. The film also speaks to broader social issues like conformity, moral panic, and the pressures of fitting into rigid social structures. The school's bureaucratic response to the incident, prioritizing image over truth, mirrors societal tendencies to avoid discomfort by simplifying complex situations into villains and victims. Koreeda refuses that simplicity, showing that empathy requires endurance, the willingness to face ambiguity without turning away. Symbolically, the recurring motif of fire and rain represents emotional cleansing and destruction. Fire emerges in moments of chaos or anger, while rain softens, cools, and restores balance. Together they mirror the emotional journey of the film, from accusation and rage to understanding and peace. The natural imagery reminds us that truth, like weather, cannot be controlled, only observed and accepted. Ultimately, Monster 2022 is a story about communication, what happens when it fails and what beauty emerges when it succeeds. It's a reflection on how love, fear, and perception intertwine to shape our understanding of others. Koreeda uses his characters to remind us that no one is born a monster. People become one when they are seen through the wrong lens. The film leaves audiences not with answers but with an urgent question. How often do we create monsters out of our own inability to see the truth in others? Monster 2022, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, is a deeply human story grounded in realism rather than spectacle, so it relies very little on overt visual effects or CGI. Instead, Koreeda and his creative team use subtle digital enhancement and practical techniques to strengthen the emotional texture of the film. While the movie might not appear to have noticeable visual effects, its restrained and invisible use of them plays a crucial role in shaping mood, continuity, and atmosphere. Rather than employing CGI to create large-scale illusions, Monster uses it to refine natural details, enhance weather, and sustain the delicate emotional balance that defines Koreeda's style. The film's setting, a small Japanese town surrounded by mountains and rivers, feels grounded and tactile, yet it benefits from carefully blended digital work. For example, several key sequences featuring rainstorms and fire were enhanced through VFX. The climactic scene involving the boys in the forest during a violent downpour stands out as one of the most technically complex in the film. Here, digital rain and atmospheric effects amplify the drama without calling attention to themselves. The water movement, mist, and lighting changes were subtly composited to create a consistent sense of realism. The audience experiences the tension of nature closing in on the characters, but the digital work remains invisible, ensuring that emotion, not technology, remains the centerpiece. Similarly, the sequences involving fire, especially during emotional peaks, make limited but effective use of CGI to control the intensity and visual rhythm. Fire in Monster symbolizes destruction and rebirth, and the VFX team made sure that flames reflected emotional volatility rather than spectacle. Digital enhancement was used to extend practical fire elements, ensuring safety on set while preserving the authenticity of the image. The effect is striking because it feels real, yet it never dominates the frame. Koreeda has always been a filmmaker who values restraint, and this extends to how he uses technology. The VFX work in Monster mirrors the director's philosophy that digital tools should serve the story, not overwhelm it. The film's post-production team used compositing to smooth transitions between multiple weather conditions, as many scenes occur across changing times of day and shifting light. For instance, when Saori searches for her son in dim twilight, the color grading and subtle visual blending between shots create a natural continuity that feels seamless but is in fact digitally achieved. This kind of invisible VFX is a hallmark of high-level filmmaking. It's not designed to impress but to immerse. Another area where CGI plays a quiet but crucial role is in environmental cleanup and continuity. Modern films, even those appearing completely realistic, often rely on digital removal of unwanted background elements. Modern signage, camera reflections, or crew shadows. Monster is no exception. Its clean, timeless aesthetic required post-production compositing to erase distractions and maintain focus on the human subjects. By eliminating visual noise, the team ensured that the audience's attention stayed on performance and emotion. One of the most effective uses of digital enhancement in Monster is the atmospheric manipulation of natural elements: fog, rain, and light diffusion. These are not purely aesthetic choices but narrative ones. The fog that rolls through the mountains during moments of uncertainty or the soft digital bloom that overlays childhood memories helps convey internal states. These visual treatments act as psychological extensions of the characters' feelings, and though subtle, they demonstrate how VFX can shape emotional reality without appearing artificial. Compared to films that rely heavily on digital spectacle, Monster uses visual effects as invisible emotional scaffolding. This approach aligns with Koreeda's preference for realism and empathy over sensationalism. The result is that viewers often forget any digital work was involved at all, which is perhaps the greatest measure of success in this context. Monster's restrained visual design underscores the director's belief that the human face, the landscape, and silence are more powerful than any rendered spectacle. The subtle interplay between practical and digital work also speaks to Koreeda's precision in visual storytelling. Practical effects, such as controlled rain rigs, natural fire sources, and fog machines, were used wherever possible, with digital augmentation serving as enhancement rather than replacement. The cinematographer Ryuto Kondo and the visual effects supervisors worked hand in hand to ensure that lighting, shadow, and physical texture were captured in-camera first. Only then did they apply minimal CGI to extend realism or correct inconsistencies. This approach prevents the digital layer from feeling separate from the live action. Another noteworthy detail lies in the film's handling of reflections and mirrors, which play a symbolic role in the story's exploration of perception and truth. Some of these reflection shots required delicate compositing to maintain continuity and avoid revealing cameras. The visual effects team's precision ensured that these moments appeared natural, keeping the film's central metaphor intact. Such technical invisibility enhances the theme of seeing versus misunderstanding, echoing the story's core question about how much truth we really perceive. It's also worth noting how the film's editing and color grading integrate with its digital effects. The transitions between the three narrative perspectives are smoothed with subtle digital crossfades and layered light adjustments. These transitions are not flashy but psychological. They help the audience shift emotional alignment from one perspective to another. In scenes where timelines overlap, visual effects were used to balance lighting and weather to maintain continuity between parallel narratives. The work is delicate and nearly imperceptible, but it plays a major role in unifying the movie's non-linear structure. In terms of shortcomings, Monster's limited reliance on VFX means there are few instances where the digital work distracts. However, one could argue that certain exterior shots of the storm verge on feeling too polished, where the rain's texture briefly betrays its digital origin. Still, this momentary artifice doesn't break immersion and is quickly grounded again by strong performances and the film's emotional weight. Overall, Monster 2022 stands as an example of how modern visual effects can be used with subtlety and integrity. Rather than dazzling with spectacle, its digital craftsmanship deepens atmosphere and meaning. By blending practical and digital techniques with restraint, Hirokazu Koreeda proves that technology, when handled thoughtfully, can serve the story's emotional core without drawing attention to itself. In Monster, VFX and CGI are not there to impress but to illuminate the invisible, to give shape to the emotional weather of the human heart. The set design and location choices in Monster 2022 are central to the film's emotional resonance and thematic depth. Production designer Keiko Mitsumatsu creates a world that feels lived in, tactile, and deeply human, grounding the story in spaces that mirror the characters' inner lives. Rather than relying on exaggerated or stylized sets, Monster builds authenticity through simplicity and small, meaningful details. Every environment feels like a natural extension of its characters, their emotions, their regrets, and their attempts to connect. The film's setting in a quiet Japanese town nestled between mountains and rivers plays a vital narrative role. Koreeda uses real locations instead of fabricated sets, allowing the physical world to shape the emotional tone of the story. The town's geography, a mix of narrow streets, aging school buildings, and expansive natural backdrops, creates a sense of intimacy and isolation at the same time. The modest apartment where Saori Mugino and her son Minato live, the elementary school where much of the conflict unfolds, and the hidden forest tunnel where the boys escape from the world all serve as psychological landscapes as much as physical ones. Each space tells us something about the characters long before dialogue confirms it. Saori's apartment, for example, reflects a single mother's quiet exhaustion and resilience. The walls are slightly worn, the furniture is practical, and the lighting is soft but dim, suggesting warmth overshadowed by uncertainty. The production design team filled the space with subtle props, a half-folded laundry basket, scattered school papers, and framed photos tucked beside the television, that build the illusion of real life without drawing attention to themselves. Every object feels like it belongs to someone with a history. These choices allow the audience to feel Saori's daily struggle and her deep love for her son in the smallest visual cues. The elementary school, by contrast, functions as a battleground of perception and misunderstanding. Its sterile corridors and utilitarian classrooms are designed to feel both familiar and slightly oppressive. The muted color palette, soft blues, beiges, and grays, reflects institutional order but also emotional coldness. The production design highlights subtle imperfections, scuffed floors, aging chalkboards, and fluorescent lights that flicker just enough to add unease. These physical details reinforce the theme of how environments, even mundane ones, can become emotionally charged spaces when trust and truth begin to fracture. The teacher's lounge, often shown during tense exchanges between faculty and parents, is one of the most carefully composed spaces in the film. The room's cramped layout and neutral tones emphasize the suffocating bureaucracy that blinds the adults to the children's emotional realities. The clutter of paperwork, coffee mugs, and bulletin boards lined with notices creates visual noise, mirroring the moral confusion and social pressure that dominate the narrative. The forest and its hidden tunnel, however, serve as the film's most symbolic location. For Minato and his friend Yori, this secluded place becomes a refuge from the judgment of adults and the cruelty of their peers. The design of this space blends natural beauty with melancholy. Fallen leaves, soft light filtered through trees, and the faint sound of wind create a tranquil but fragile sanctuary. The tunnel, aged and abandoned, represents both escape and entrapment. Its rough concrete walls and moss-covered entrance suggest forgotten histories, paralleling the way children's emotions are often overlooked or misunderstood by adults. The tunnel's recurring presence across different story perspectives reinforces its symbolic function as a space of truth, where pretense fades and honesty emerges. Another subtle yet powerful location is the school principal's office, which becomes a moral crossroads in the story. The office is decorated with neat files, plants, and commendation plaques, all symbols of order and control. Yet the symmetry of the layout and the sterile decor convey emotional detachment. When Saori confronts the principal about her son's treatment, the design of the office, its clean lines and careful organization, contrasts sharply with the raw emotion of the scene. This interplay between environment and character highlights how institutions prioritize appearance over compassion. Monster also uses the surrounding town and its natural environment to reinforce the cyclical rhythm of its narrative. The overcast skies, muted colors, and constant presence of rain or mist evoke a sense of melancholy and introspection. The production team relied heavily on real weather and natural light, which gives the film an organic, unforced visual quality. The recurring use of water, puddles, rivers, and rain adds emotional texture, symbolizing both cleansing and confusion. Even in outdoor settings, the film's design maintains a sense of controlled realism. The streets are ordinary, the homes modest, the playgrounds unremarkable, yet everything feels imbued with emotional weight because of how Koreeda and Mitsumatsu frame them within the story's perspective shifts. Each time the narrative restarts from a different character's point of view, familiar spaces look slightly altered. This is achieved through minor redressing, objects moved, lighting changed, or color tones shifted. These subtle differences reflect how memory and perception shape our understanding of truth. The production design's quiet brilliance lies in these nearly invisible adjustments, which communicate emotional transformation without ever announcing themselves. Props also play a storytelling role throughout the film. The recurring use of Minato's school bag, Yori's drawings, and household objects like mugs or notebooks act as emotional anchors across timelines. They remind the audience that even ordinary items can carry the weight of love, guilt, and misunderstanding. The film's attention to these everyday details deepens its realism, making its world feel both specific and universal. Ultimately, the set design and locations in Monster 2022 do more than provide a backdrop. They build the emotional architecture of the story. Each environment, whether it's the claustrophobic school corridor or the open forest clearing, reflects the character's evolving states of mind. Through careful composition, texture, and restraint, The production design reinforces the film's central question about how people see one another and how truth changes depending on where you stand. In Monster, the spaces are not just where the story happens, they are what the story is made of. The dialogue and script of Monster 2022, written by Yuji Sakamoto, are among the film's most striking achievements. The screenplay is deceptively quiet, filled with pauses, overlapping conversations, and silences that say more than any line of exposition could. Sakamoto crafts dialogue that feels natural yet deeply intentional, allowing each word, hesitation, and misunderstanding to carry emotional weight. Rather than delivering information directly, the script reveals character through tone, rhythm, and what remains unsaid. This approach gives the film its emotional authenticity and invites the audience to lean in, interpret, and feel. At its core, Monster is built on miscommunication, how language can both connect and divide people. The script plays with this tension by making dialogue an unreliable vehicle for truth. Early in the film, when Saori questions her son Minato about his bruises and strange behavior, his fragmented answers only deepen her worry. His words are hesitant, evasive, and sometimes contradictory. Instead of offering clarity, the dialogue amplifies her confusion, mirroring how parents often struggle to understand what their children are going through. Sakamoto captures this dynamic with remarkable precision, using childlike phrasing that conceals profound emotional pain. The writing trusts the audience to read between the lines rather than explaining everything outright. In contrast, the conversations between Saori and the school administration are clipped and bureaucratic, exposing how institutions hide behind polite language to avoid responsibility. When Saori confronts teacher Michitoshi Hori, the dialogue bristles with tension. Every exchange feels like a negotiation between truth and defense. The words themselves are civil, but the subtext is seething. Saori's demand for answers and Hori's carefully measured responses reflect a system where truth is filtered through formality. The script uses this linguistic restraint to critique social structures that prioritize image over empathy. One of the screenplay's most powerful tools is its use of repetition. The film's triptych structure retells the same events from three perspectives: Saori's, Hori's, and Minato's, and each version reshapes the meaning of earlier dialogue. A line that sounds accusatory in one version becomes compassionate in another. A moment of silence that once felt awkward becomes loaded with regret. Sakamoto's writing turns language into a mirror of perception, showing how tone and context can completely change meaning. This structural repetition transforms ordinary dialogue into an emotional puzzle, rewarding careful listening. The dialogue between Minato and Yori is particularly revealing. Their exchanges are simple, often consisting of half-finished sentences and shy pauses, but beneath that simplicity lies a deep emotional connection. They speak like children, yet the audience senses adult-sized fears in their words. Sakamoto uses this understated communication to express tenderness, confusion, and vulnerability without ever turning sentimental. In one of their most memorable scenes, when Minato asks Yori what it means to be a monster, the question is both literal and metaphorical. The script leaves space for interpretation, letting the audience feel the weight of judgment and self-doubt carried in that single word. Silence plays an equally important role in the screenplay. Koreeda, known for his mastery of quiet moments, uses pauses as part of the dialogue's rhythm. The script allows characters to sit in discomfort, to leave questions unanswered, and to let emotion build in the gaps between words. This restraint gives the film its natural flow and emotional credibility. In many scenes, the absence of speech is more powerful than any monologue could be. When Saori silently watches her son sleep, or when Hori stands alone after his reputation has been destroyed, the silence becomes dialogue, the unspoken language of regret and empathy. What makes Sakamoto's writing stand out is its emotional layering. Each character's speech pattern reveals their psychology. Saori's lines are direct and impulsive, reflecting a mother's desperate instinct to protect. Hori's dialogue is careful and subdued, showing both his guilt and his fear of being misunderstood. Minato's words are fragmented, echoing a child's struggle to articulate feelings he doesn't fully understand. Even the supporting characters, such as the school principal and Yori's father, speak in ways that expose their emotional blind spots. The principal's overly formal tone hides her guilt, while Yori's father's blunt speech masks grief he cannot name. The film's emotional turning points are built around dialogue that doubles as revelation. When the story shifts from adult perspectives to the children's, the dialogue takes on a new light. A scene that once felt accusatory now reads as tragic misunderstanding. For example, The same classroom exchange that Saori interprets as verbal abuse later becomes an act of concern when viewed from Hori's perspective. This narrative inversion highlights the precision of the script. Each line is designed to carry multiple meanings depending on who speaks and who listens. Sakamoto's script also demonstrates discipline in avoiding melodrama. Even during moments of confrontation, the dialogue never erupts into shouting matches or heavy-handed declarations. The characters speak like real people trying to navigate pain rather than like actors performing it. This realism makes the emotional peaks hit harder because they feel earned. When Saori finally realizes the truth about her son and Hori, the simplicity of her dialogue, just a few words of acknowledgement, feels more devastating than any lengthy apology could. The film's closing sequences return to minimalism. In the final act, when the boys find refuge in the forest tunnel, their conversation is reduced to fragments of reassurance and wonder. The script embraces innocence, ending on the quiet rhythm of discovery rather than resolution. These closing words echo earlier lines but with new meaning, illustrating how language evolves as understanding deepens. If there is one critique to make, it is that the script's subtlety may frustrate viewers expecting clearer exposition. Some scenes leave emotional or narrative threads unresolved, but this ambiguity is deliberate. The film's message about perception and truth depends on what is left unspoken. Ultimately, the dialogue and script of Monster 2022 exemplify the art of restraint. Every line, pause, and silence contributes to a layered emotional experience. Yuji Sakamoto's writing captures the complexity of human communication, how we speak, how we listen, and how easily we misunderstand. In Monster, words are never just words, they are mirrors reflecting fear, love, and the fragile hope for connection. Monster 2022, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda and written by Yuji Sakamoto, is best understood as a deeply human drama rather than a straightforward genre film. It doesn't fit neatly into any single category like horror or thriller, though its title and structure might initially suggest those. Instead, it operates as a psychological and emotional mystery, one that borrows elements from multiple genres: social drama, coming of age, and suspense, only to rework them into something uniquely introspective. The result is a film that challenges audience expectations by offering emotional depth instead of sensationalism. Koreeda's approach demonstrates how genre conventions can be transformed into vehicles for empathy and truth, rather than formulaic storytelling. At first glance, the film's opening scenes suggest the start of a suspense drama or even a social thriller. A single mother, Saori, grows suspicious of her son Minato's erratic behavior and unexplained injuries. She confronts his school, believing that his teacher, Mr. Hori, is abusing him. The tension, pacing, and unanswered questions echo classic elements of a domestic thriller. Viewers expect secrets, confrontations, and perhaps a villain to emerge. Yet Koreeda subverts those expectations almost immediately. Instead of providing a clear antagonist or escalating conflict, the film pivots toward quiet observation. The focus shifts from uncovering external wrongdoing to exploring the interior lives of its characters. In doing so, Monster transforms from mystery into meditation. The film's three-part structure plays a key role in how it executes and transcends genre. Each section, told from Saori's, Hori's, and Minato's perspectives, reshapes the narrative tone. The first act feels like a parental drama tinged with paranoia, echoing the rhythms of social realism films that critique authority and institutional neglect. The second act adopts the perspective of the accused teacher, reframing earlier events as a tragedy of misunderstanding and misplaced blame. This section mirrors investigative dramas where truth unfolds slowly through shifting viewpoints. By the third act, when the story reveals the children's perspective, the tone softens into an intimate coming-of-age tale filled with emotional wonder and innocence. The genre has now fully evolved, and what began as tension resolves into tenderness. This structural transformation is Koreeda's way of deconstructing genre conventions themselves, inviting viewers to re-examine how perception shapes truth. Where many dramas might rely on heavy exposition or emotional confrontation, Monster opts for restraint. Its quiet tone recalls Koreeda's earlier works like Nobody Knows and Shoplifters, where realism and empathy replace melodrama. The film's emotional core lies not in grand gestures but in subtle shifts of understanding. While Western audiences might associate the word monster with horror or creature-based cinema, here the term becomes metaphorical, a reflection on how society labels and fears what it does not understand. This reinterpretation of the title alone shows how the film challenges genre expectations. it uses a familiar trope to explore human rather than supernatural darkness. The screenplay also resists the clichés of moral polarization. In many dramas or thrillers, characters are divided into victims and villains, heroes and antagonists. Monster refuses that dichotomy. Each perspective humanizes previously misunderstood characters, dismantling any sense of clear morality. Hori, initially framed as a predator, becomes a man undone by rumor and guilt. Saori, first seen as a righteous mother, later appears impulsive and blinded by fear. Minato, the supposed victim, transforms into a child wrestling with self-identity and emotional confusion. By refusing to assign moral absolutes, the film elevates itself beyond standard drama into something richer, an exploration of empathy as the ultimate truth. The emotional pacing of the film also differs from conventional dramatic arcs. Instead of building toward a climactic revelation, Koreeda allows tension to ebb and flow like memory. Moments of confrontation are followed by long silences or gentle observations. This rhythm feels closer to literature than cinema, aligning Monster with arthouse storytelling more than commercial drama. While this may alienate viewers seeking fast-paced resolution, it rewards those who value psychological nuance and emotional realism. The absence of overt genre markers, such as suspenseful music cues or shock twists, makes the story feel grounded and universal. Monster's genre hybridity also extends to its social commentary. Beneath its emotional narrative lies a critique of conformity, rumor culture, and the rigid hierarchies of education and parenting. These are hallmarks of social realism, but Koreeda infuses them with the tenderness of childhood cinema. The scenes between Minato and Yori feel like they belong to a different film altogether, a gentle coming-of-age story about friendship, self-discovery, and acceptance. This tonal shift could have been jarring, but instead it enriches the narrative, turning what might have been a bleak moral drama into something hopeful. By blending genres, social critique, mystery, and childhood exploration, the film mirrors the complexity of real life, where truth and compassion rarely exist in isolation. In terms of execution, Monster 2022 is remarkably disciplined. Its restraint, both emotional and aesthetic, is what distinguishes it from genre-driven counterparts. While many filmmakers might use the premise to heighten suspense or deliver a dramatic payoff, Koreeda uses it to examine perception itself. Every misunderstanding, accusation, and reconciliation reflects a shift in emotional truth rather than plot mechanics. This approach may test the patience of viewers expecting the familiar rhythm of a mystery, but it ultimately delivers something more rewarding, a story that lingers in thought long after it ends. Comparing it to traditional genre expectations, Monster succeeds precisely because it refuses to conform. It borrows the emotional tension of a thriller, the moral complexity of a drama, and the innocence of a coming-of-age film, weaving them into a cohesive whole. Where genre films often demand resolution, Monster offers reflection. Its climax is not a revelation of who did what but an understanding of why people perceive differently. In that sense, the film redefines what a monster means, not as a creature of horror, but as a symbol of misunderstanding, fear, and love's fragile boundaries. Ultimately, Monster 2022 achieves mastery in genre execution by transcending it. Rather than following formulas, it reshapes them into a cinematic essay about empathy, perception, and truth. Hirokazu Koreeda proves that storytelling need not be confined by category to reach emotional universality. The film's subtle fusion of tones, suspenseful yet tender, tragic yet hopeful, creates a new form of dramatic realism that honors the best of cinema while quietly rewriting its rules. Monster 2022, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, operates not only as a personal drama but also as a reflection of Japanese society and its quiet yet pervasive pressures. Beneath its emotional storytelling lies a dense web of social and cultural commentary that resonates beyond national borders. The film's structure, three overlapping perspectives of the same story, becomes a metaphor for the fragmented truths that shape modern social life. It examines how institutions, rumors, and unspoken hierarchies distort understanding, while also confronting issues of conformity, identity, and compassion. In this way, Monster functions as both a character study and a mirror to contemporary Japan, offering insight into how society defines and misdefines morality, authority, and difference. At its core, the film critiques the rigid social systems that govern behavior in Japanese culture. Schools, parents, and authority figures are portrayed as enforcers of social order rather than nurturers of individuality. The classroom becomes a microcosm of Japanese society, where rules, appearances, and silence often take precedence over truth and empathy. The teacher, Mr. Hori, and the single mother, Saori, are both products of this system. Pressure to maintain order and control, even when it comes at the expense of understanding. The school's bureaucratic coldness, seen in its unwillingness to address Saori's concerns with transparency, reflects a larger societal problem: the prioritization of institutional image over human well-being. Koreeda's depiction of these scenes serves as a quiet but powerful indictment of how authority in Japan can suppress individual voices in the name of harmony. The film also speaks to the dangers of rumor culture and collective judgment. Once Saori's suspicions about Hori begin to spread, truth becomes irrelevant, perception takes over. Koreeda uses this narrative thread to comment on how modern societies, Japanese or otherwise, can weaponize misinformation and moral panic. In this way, the film feels global, reflecting a universal anxiety about how communities rush to assign blame rather than seek understanding. It is a pointed reflection on the digital age as well, where reputation can be destroyed by assumption and narrative is often shaped by incomplete information. One of the most potent layers of Monster's social commentary lies in its exploration of childhood and emotional repression. Minato and Yori, the two boys at the center of the story, symbolize innocence crushed by societal expectations. Their relationship, tender and misunderstood, is treated with suspicion by adults who cannot see beyond rigid norms. Through their friendship, the film touches subtly on themes of gender expression and identity, topics still considered sensitive within mainstream Japanese discourse. Minato's behavior, which some perceive as strange, and Yori's gentle, non-conforming nature both challenge the narrow definitions of masculinity that Japanese culture often upholds. Koreeda never turns this into overt social critique, but the subtext is clear. Difference is easily labeled as deviance in a culture that prizes conformity. The film's handling of parenthood also provides a lens on generational change within Japan. Saori, as a single mother, embodies both resilience and vulnerability in a society that continues to stigmatize single-parent households. Her protectiveness toward Minato becomes a form of rebellion against a system that often devalues maternal intuition. However, Koreeda also portrays her flaws, her impulsive accusations, her desperate need for validation, to show how isolation can lead to distortion. In doing so, the film questions whether modern Japanese society provides emotional space for parents, particularly women, to express fear and uncertainty without judgment. This dimension adds complexity to the film's commentary on gender roles, depicting how expectations of perfection harm both adults and children. Monster's triptych narrative also comments on the nature of truth and perception within a collectivist society. Each viewpoint reveals how people interpret events through their own cultural and social conditioning. Saori views herself as a mother defending justice, Hori sees himself as a scapegoat for institutional cowardice, and Minato experiences the confusion of being misunderstood by every adult in his life. The shifting perspective suggests that societal truths are rarely objective. They are constructed through bias, fear, and cultural conditioning. This reflects Koreeda's ongoing interest in how systems shape morality, seen previously in his films like Shoplifters and Like Father, Like Son. Cultural restraint plays a significant role in Monster's emotional tone. The film is defined by silences, unspoken emotions, and careful manners, all hallmarks of Japanese social communication. Yet Koreeda uses these traits to highlight the emotional cost of restraint. The inability to voice pain, apologize sincerely, or express affection becomes a quiet tragedy running through the film. This aspect of the story resonates strongly with audiences familiar with East Asian cultural norms but also connects universally with anyone who has felt silenced by societal expectation. Koreeda's critique is not purely negative. For all its sadness, Monster also celebrates empathy as a transformative force. The children's friendship represents an alternative to the judgmental adult world, a small, fragile ecosystem where understanding and care replace fear. Their scenes in nature, filled with light and freedom, serve as visual and emotional counterpoints to the suffocating order of the classroom. In this contrast lies one of the film's most profound cultural statements, that humanity must rediscover innocence and emotional honesty to heal from the damage of conformity and repression. The social commentary in Monster extends beyond Japan's borders because it addresses universal patterns, how societies, institutions, and individuals define the other. The title itself becomes symbolic of this phenomenon. Every person in the film is, at some point, perceived as a monster by someone else. This framing turns the movie into a reflection on the dangers of moral labeling, whether in Japanese classrooms or global discourse. Koreeda invites viewers to question who the real monster is, the one who acts differently, or the one who refuses to understand. In the end, Monster 2022 uses its intimate story to make broad, compassionate observations about human society. Its critique of authority, conformity, rumor, and repression is delivered with subtlety rather than confrontation. Koreeda's restraint allows the film's moral and cultural implications to resonate long after it ends. It stands as both an emotional drama and a social parable, urging viewers, especially those in structured, high-pressure cultures, to look beyond surface order and find truth in empathy. Monster 2022 is not a film that relies on loud twists or flashy spectacle to hold audience attention. Instead, its engagement comes from emotional tension, layered storytelling, and the slow revelation of truth through shifting perspectives. The film pulls viewers into its quiet yet powerful world by making them active participants in interpretation. Each perspective retold in the story invites viewers to question what they thought they knew, transforming the act of watching into an experience of empathy and re-evaluation. This structural design makes Monster a film that lingers long after the credits roll, provoking conversation and re-examination. One of the earliest moments that captures audience attention comes from the opening scenes of Minato's behavioral change. The film begins in confusion and emotional urgency, as Saori notices her son's strange behavior, coming home with wet clothes, isolating himself, and whispering about monsters. For parents and empathetic viewers alike, these scenes hit a nerve, sparking questions about bullying, trauma, or abuse. Koreeda's deliberate ambiguity keeps audiences on edge, inviting them to project their own fears onto the situation. The restrained pacing ensures that every glance and line of dialogue feels charged, keeping viewers emotionally invested in uncovering what is really happening. The middle act, which shifts focus to the teacher Mr. Hori, is another point where audience engagement deepens. Koreeda's choice to reframe earlier events from Hori's perspective challenges viewers' assumptions. The tension comes not from plot mechanics but from moral uncertainty. Was Hori guilty of mistreating Minato, or was he misunderstood? When viewers realize how easily perception can be manipulated by context, the film transforms from a domestic mystery into a meditation on empathy and misunderstanding. Many audiences find themselves reflecting on how quickly they judged characters earlier in the film, a self-awareness that makes the viewing experience profoundly interactive. Emotionally, one of the film's strongest hooks is the portrayal of Minato and Yori's friendship. Their connection feels tender, natural, and deeply human. Scenes of the two boys hiding in a train car or exploring the woods evoke both nostalgia and heartbreak. The film's quiet rhythm in these moments invites audiences to slow down, observe, and feel. It's here that Monster taps into a universal emotional current, the innocence of youth contrasted with adult misunderstanding. These scenes tend to be the ones most discussed online and among audiences, as they reveal the purity and vulnerability that the adult world so often fails to protect. A particularly unforgettable sequence occurs near the film's climax, when Minato and Yori escape into the mountains. The combination of natural light, snow, and silence creates a visual and emotional crescendo that leaves viewers breathless. The boys' decision to flee, coupled with the adults' frantic search for them, becomes the emotional and thematic heart of the film. Many viewers describe this section as both suspenseful and transcendent, an example of how Monster balances realism with spiritual undertones. The imagery of the boys disappearing into fog and flame has sparked widespread discussion about whether the ending is literal or metaphorical, fueling debate about survival, freedom, and forgiveness. Audience engagement also thrives on the film's narrative structure. Because the story unfolds through three distinct perspectives, Saori's, Hori's, and Minato's, each act reframes what came before it. Viewers who enjoy puzzle-like storytelling find satisfaction in connecting details and reinterpreting prior scenes. Koreeda rewards attentive audiences with subtle visual cues, a gesture repeated from a new angle, a line of dialogue recontextualized by a different emotional truth. This complexity gives Monster strong rewatchability, as viewers often discover new emotional and thematic layers upon revisiting it. Certain scenes have also become focal points for audience discussion and social media sharing. The moment when Minato asks his mother if he is a monster resonates deeply because it distills the film's central question about how society labels those it doesn't understand. Another frequently discussed scene is the quiet conversation between Hori and the school principal, where bureaucratic indifference contrasts with genuine guilt. These moments are not showy, yet they linger precisely because of their emotional restraint and moral weight. They become the kind of scenes that viewers quote, analyze, and revisit. Monster's audience appeal also lies in its moral ambiguity. Unlike most dramas that guide the audience toward clear conclusions, Koreeda leaves room for uncertainty. This encourages viewers to interpret character motivations differently. Some empathize with Saori's protective instincts, others sympathize with Hori's quiet suffering. This open-endedness fuels post-viewing debates about right and wrong, truth and perception. In this way, Monster transcends the passive experience of watching a film and instead becomes a conversation piece, discussed in film circles, classrooms, and online communities. Another key aspect of engagement is the film's emotional pacing. Koreeda balances tension and catharsis through silence rather than spectacle. Long pauses, minimal dialogue, and lingering close-ups invite introspection, allowing viewers to feel the weight of moments rather than rushing through them. The use of natural sound, the hum of cicadas, the crunch of snow, the echo of footsteps, creates sensory immersion. This kind of subtle world-building keeps audiences emotionally anchored even during the slowest stretches, transforming stillness into suspense. For American audiences, Monster 2022 holds particular fascination because it bridges cultural distance with emotional universality. While the film is distinctly Japanese in tone and setting, its themes of misunderstanding, parental love, and social judgment feel familiar across cultures. Viewers in the United States often connect to the film through its commentary on how authority and rumor can distort truth, making it a point of empathy in discussions about systemic failure and personal responsibility. The universality of its emotional beats ensures engagement across language and culture. Finally, Monster's rewatchability is one of its greatest strengths. The layered storytelling structure means each viewing offers a different experience depending on what you already know. The first watch might focus on mystery, the second on empathy, and the third on the subtle interplay between sound, silence, and imagery. Small details, like a glance, a reflection, or a recurring melody, gain new meaning with context. For many viewers, that depth is what turns Monster from a one-time emotional experience into a lasting cinematic relationship. Ultimately, Monster 2022 engages audiences not through spectacle or shock, but through intimacy, ambiguity, and emotional truth. Its most powerful moments are the quietest ones, the hesitant apologies, the misinterpreted gestures, the long silences that say everything words cannot. Those are the moments that stay with viewers, sparking reflection, conversation, and a lasting connection long after the final frame fades to black. Comparing Monster 2022 to other films within its thematic and stylistic range highlights both its uniqueness and its cinematic lineage. Director Hirokazu Koreeda has always been known for crafting emotionally precise, morally complex human dramas, and Monster fits comfortably within that tradition while also expanding it. When placed alongside Koreeda's previous work such as Shoplifters, Like Father, Like Son, and Nobody Knows, Monster stands out as his most structurally ambitious film to date. Where earlier works relied on straightforward narrative realism, this one introduces a Rashomon-like device, reinterpreting the same events from three perspectives. This choice connects it not only to Koreeda's filmography but also to global storytelling traditions that examine truth and perception. In tone and subject, Monster shares DNA with Shoplifters, which also explored marginalized lives and questioned societal judgment. Both films challenge audiences to reconsider moral labels and the social systems that create them. However, while Shoplifters examined family and poverty through warmth and human connection, Monster turns its gaze toward education, authority, and communication. Its emotional core is colder and more ambiguous, reflecting a society fractured by misunderstanding rather than united by compassion. For many viewers, this shift marks Monster as Koreeda's most somber and introspective work, where empathy exists but must fight to survive under institutional weight. Thematically, Monster invites comparison to Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, the 1950 masterpiece that pioneered the multiple perspective narrative in cinema. Both films use retelling as a device to question objective truth. However, Koreeda's approach is more intimate than Kurosawa's philosophical detachment. While Rashomon used structure to explore human deceit and moral relativity, Monster uses it to explore emotional blindness and empathy. The repetition of events in Monster is less about uncovering lies and more about exposing incomplete understanding. This makes it feel like a softer, more humane descendant of Rashomon's existential framework. Another strong comparison can be drawn with Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder and Parasite, which similarly dissect societal hypocrisy and moral complexity through layered storytelling. Like Bong, Koreeda uses tone shifts, moving from suspense to empathy to melancholy, to reflect how real life resists neat categorization. Yet Monster lacks Bong's sharp tonal contrast and biting satire. Its critique of society emerges through quiet observation rather than confrontation. In this way, Monster might frustrate viewers expecting the urgency of a thriller, but it rewards those who prefer slow emotional revelation. Monster also shares thematic terrain with films like Todd Field's Tar and Kenneth Lonergan's Manchester by the Sea, both of which explore guilt, misunderstanding, and the consequences of moral perception. Like Tar, Monster examines how societal judgment can destroy reputations before truth has a chance to emerge. However, Koreeda's version is far less cynical. Where Field's film emphasizes power dynamics and downfall, Koreeda's centers on innocence, communication, and redemption. The result is a gentler, more universal emotional appeal, even when the subject matter turns tragic. When compared to other Japanese dramas that explore social systems, Monster recalls the work of directors such as Naomi Kawase and Ryosuke Hamaguchi. Kawase's radiance and Hamaguchi's Drive My Car share with Monster a deep interest in emotional miscommunication and unspoken pain. Drive My Car, for example, also uses silence, repetition, and perspective to reveal inner truths. However, Koreeda's use of multiple viewpoints gives Monster a more intricate structure, creating a narrative puzzle where empathy grows as understanding deepens. In contrast, Hamaguchi builds empathy through extended conversation and direct confrontation. Both methods achieve emotional intimacy, but through distinct cinematic languages. From a Western perspective, Monster's storytelling rhythm and visual tone might remind audiences of films by Terrence Malick or Derek Cianfrance. Like Malick's The Tree of Life, Monster uses nature as a spiritual mirror. Snow, wind, and fire reflect the characters' internal states. Similarly, Cianfrance's Blue Valentine shares Monster's quiet heartbreak and non-linear approach to emotional truth. In all these films, the directors reject clear answers in favor of emotional resonance, trusting the audience to find meaning in silence and detail. Koreeda's restraint gives Monster an authenticity that feels rare in an era of over-explained cinema. In terms of structure, Monster also aligns with Asghar Farhadi's A Separation and The Salesman. Farhadi, like Koreeda, is fascinated by moral ambiguity and shifting perception. Both filmmakers build tension from miscommunication rather than spectacle. A Separation's portrayal of institutional bias and social pressure mirrors Monster's critique of Japan's education system, where adults are often trapped by their need to appear righteous. Yet where Farhadi's work is marked by confrontation and escalating emotion, Koreeda's tone remains meditative, even mournful. This difference reveals the contrast between Iranian and Japanese cinematic traditions. Farhadi's realism thrives on conflict, while Koreeda's realism thrives on restraint. Monster's closest thematic cousin in contemporary cinema may be Lucas Dant's Close, a 2022 Belgian film that also explores the bond between two boys and the tragic consequences of misunderstanding. Both films examine how society interprets and polices emotional closeness, especially among young males. However, Close uses visual minimalism and emotional immediacy to evoke heartbreak, while Monster uses narrative complexity to build empathy through understanding. Both films share a commitment to tenderness and moral introspection, but Koreeda's version adds a structural and philosophical layer that invites rewatching and discussion. Comparing Monster to Koreeda's own evolution as a filmmaker shows how he continues to push his thematic boundaries. Earlier works like Afterlife and Nobody Knows centered on empathy through observation, while Monster takes that same empathy and places it inside a fragmented truth structure. The film feels like the culmination of Koreeda's lifelong exploration of how humans misunderstand each other, made more resonant by his decision to step outside Japan for several recent projects before returning home. This return gives Monster both local intimacy and global awareness, as if Koreeda now sees Japan's social anxieties through a broader human lens. In terms of weaknesses, Monster's subtlety and deliberate pacing may test audiences accustomed to faster or more declarative storytelling. Compared to the emotional immediacy of Shoplifters or the thematic urgency of Parasite, Monster feels quieter, more distant. However, that restraint is intentional. It demands patience and empathy rather than quick judgment. The film's greatest strength lies in its ability to engage viewers intellectually and emotionally without manipulation. Ultimately, Monster 2022 stands as both a continuation of Koreeda's humanist cinema and a thoughtful evolution of the moral puzzle genre pioneered by filmmakers like Kurosawa and Farhadi. Monster 2022 is a film deeply rooted in symbolism, where every recurring image, sound, and object carries layered meaning. Director Hirokazu Koreeda and screenwriter Yuji Sakamoto use visual and narrative metaphors not just as decoration but as emotional anchors that help express what the characters cannot say aloud. The film's understated realism conceals a network of symbols: fire, wind, mirrors, trains, and the natural world, all of which function as mirrors of perception, guilt, and truth. These recurring motifs invite the viewer to interpret events beyond dialogue, making Monster as much a poem of imagery as it is a story of misunderstanding. The most central symbol in Monster is fire. Introduced early through the news of a mysterious fire that devastates part of the town, it immediately becomes a metaphor for chaos, judgment, and moral blindness. Fire represents both destruction and purification. It consumes what is false but also exposes truth through light. The school building's partial burning is not simply a plot device but a reflection of the emotional combustion within the community. As accusations and rumors spread, relationships and reputations burn in similar ways. By the end, the fire imagery circles back as a commentary on how misunderstanding and gossip can devastate lives faster than flames. Fire becomes the film's emotional pulse, marking moments when truth is distorted by fear or pride. Another recurring symbol is wind, often shown rustling trees, shaking windows, or carrying distant sounds. Wind in Monster signifies unseen forces, emotions, rumors, and truths that move invisibly between characters. Koreeda uses wind as an atmospheric connector, a reminder that feelings and misunderstandings travel in subtle ways, shaping outcomes long before anyone speaks them aloud. The wind also parallels the children's innocence and freedom, often appearing in scenes of play or introspection. When Minato and Yori stand in open fields or near the forest, the wind wraps around them, suggesting both vulnerability and liberation. It's as if nature itself is trying to whisper what human communication fails to express. Mirrors and reflections form another key metaphor. Throughout Monster, characters are frequently framed against windows, puddles, or glass, surfaces that reflect but also distort. These visual echoes reinforce the film's theme of perception and misunderstanding. Each person's version of the truth is a reflection, partial and shaped by their own emotions. In the first act, when the mother observes her son's behavior through glass, her view is literally and symbolically filtered. She sees only fragments, just as we do. The repeated use of reflections asks the viewer to question what they are truly seeing. By the final act, when perspectives realign, the metaphor resolves. Truth exists, but it must be seen from more than one angle to become whole. The school building itself operates as a powerful symbol of authority, repression, and moral structure. Its sterile hallways, harsh lighting, and closed doors embody the rigidity of institutions that prize discipline over empathy. Within those walls, characters misinterpret and project, each assuming moral authority without full understanding. The building's later destruction by fire is not just physical but symbolic. It represents the collapse of false order and the exposure of emotional truth. Once the structure burns, the film transitions into open natural spaces, signaling a move from control to freedom, from repression to emotional honesty. Nature as a whole plays a central symbolic role in Monster. Water, forests, and mountains appear repeatedly as contrasts to the human world of accusation and judgment. When the children retreat into nature, they escape societal labels and rediscover authenticity. Nature becomes the only place where truth exists without distortion. The boys' refuge in the forest is symbolic of purity and renewal, echoing Koreeda's long-standing interest in how innocence survives within flawed systems. The recurring sound of rain, the shimmer of river water, and the gentle sway of grass all create a meditative rhythm that counters the harshness of human misunderstanding. Nature, in Koreeda's world, is not indifferent. It listens, absorbs, and reflects emotional truth. Trains are another motif woven into the film's visual language. They symbolize both transition and emotional distance, carrying characters between misunderstanding and revelation. Train windows echo the theme of perspective. They frame fleeting moments and remind viewers how perception changes with movement. For the children, the train embodies escape and discovery. For the adults, it represents the unstoppable passage of time and regret. In several scenes, the rhythmic sound of trains parallels emotional tension, suggesting inevitability and the momentum of truth. Color symbolism is also carefully employed throughout the film. Muted tones dominate the adult world. Grays, browns, and dim lighting evoke conformity and restraint. In contrast, the scenes featuring the children often introduce greens and blues, colors tied to freedom and emotional openness. The rare bursts of red, seen in firelight or clothing, symbolize moments of heightened emotion, anger, or revelation. Koreeda's control of color is subtle but deliberate. He uses palette shifts to guide the viewer's empathy and signal changes in emotional truth. Another recurring metaphor lies in the film's title itself, monster. It's used not to identify a villain but to question how society constructs labels. The word becomes a mirror reflecting fear and prejudice. Each character projects their own definition of a monster. Sometimes it's a bully, sometimes a negligent teacher, sometimes an unstable parent. Yet by the end, the label dissolves, and the audience realizes that the real monster is misunderstanding itself. The title's transformation over the course of the narrative is one of the film's most profound symbolic arcs. Even silence operates as a symbolic element in Monster. The absence of dialogue in key scenes is not emptiness but expression. It symbolizes emotional repression and the limits of language. When characters stop speaking, the camera begins to communicate for them through imagery, gesture, and environment. This non-verbal communication becomes a metaphor for empathy itself, understanding not through words, but through observation and presence. In the final act, when the perspectives converge and nature reclaims the screen, the visual metaphors resolve into a single emotional truth. Compassion requires seeing beyond appearances. Fire, wind, mirrors, and silence all lead to that realization. Monster uses its symbols not as puzzles to decode, but as emotional language, each image carrying a moral and psychological weight that words cannot contain. Through this network of metaphors, Koreeda turns a simple story of misunderstanding into a profound meditation on perception, empathy, and the fragile truth that connects us all. Monster 2022 stands alone as a singular work rather than part of a franchise, but its historical and cinematic context gives it depth that connects it to both Japan's social history and the broader legacy of humanist storytelling. Directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, Monster continues his exploration of moral ambiguity, family relationships, and the emotional consequences of misunderstanding, a lineage of themes that have defined his career. Though the film does not belong to a shared universe or direct sequel line, it can be viewed as a spiritual successor to Koreeda's earlier works like Nobody Knows, like Father, like Son, and Shoplifters, each of which also examines how fragile human bonds are tested by societal pressure. In that sense, Monster carries the thematic DNA of a franchise built on emotional realism and social critique rather than recurring characters. Set in a contemporary Japanese town, Monster's historical context lies not in a distant past but in its reflection of modern Japan's social fabric, its educational systems, moral expectations, and the cultural importance of reputation. While the story itself is fictional, it mirrors real societal issues such as bullying, parental anxiety, and the failure of institutions to listen before judging. Koreeda captures this through his multi-perspective structure, which unfolds the same events through different viewpoints. This narrative device has a historical cinematic precedent. It directly recalls Akira Kurosawa's 1950 masterpiece Rashomon, which also examined truth and perception through multiple accounts of a single incident. By drawing on this structure, Monster situates itself in the long tradition of Japanese storytelling that interrogates truth and morality, blending contemporary realism with classical narrative experimentation. The film also subtly echoes the social anxieties of post-2010 Japan, a nation grappling with rapid modernization, mental health concerns, and generational disconnect. The setting, a town defined by its ordinary school, housing complexes, and surrounding nature, becomes a microcosm for Japan's social contradictions. The pressures on children to conform, the expectations placed on teachers, and the judgment parents face all reflect modern realities. Koreeda transforms these societal issues into a timeless moral drama, making Monster both contemporary and universal. In terms of continuity within Koreeda's body of work, Monster represents a maturation of his narrative approach. Earlier films like Shoplifters and After the Storm dealt with families on the margins of society, exploring empathy within moral gray zones. Monster expands that examination to institutions, schools, the media, and authority figures, showing how misunderstanding becomes systemic. For longtime Koreeda viewers, there are familiar storytelling Easter eggs. The soft natural lighting, long static takes that frame domestic spaces, and an emphasis on children as moral centers rather than passive victims. The way Koreeda stages the children's world in contrast to the adult world recalls his past interest in how innocence interacts with flawed adult systems. These callbacks reward viewers who have followed his evolution as a filmmaker while remaining fully accessible to new audiences. From a cinematic history perspective, Monster also fits into a broader global lineage of films that explore truth through shifting perspectives. Beyond Rashomon, comparisons can be drawn to works like Denis Villeneuve's Polytechnique or Asghar Farhadi's A Separation, which similarly depict how truth becomes fractured through human bias. Koreeda's interpretation, however, remains distinctly Japanese in tone and rhythm, more meditative, less judgmental. He uses repetition not to confuse but to reveal emotional layering, and his historical contribution lies in showing how the Rashomon structure can serve empathy rather than cynicism. The screenplay by Yuji Sakamoto adds another layer of cultural relevance. Known for his sharp writing on human relationships, Sakamoto infuses Monster with the kind of quiet realism that characterizes much of Japanese television and film drama. His writing situates the film in a lineage of post-war Japanese storytelling that values subtle emotional truth over spectacle. This makes Monster part of a historical movement that resists Western sensationalism, instead favoring ambiguity and reflection as tools for moral exploration. Even though Monster is not based on a real event, it dramatizes truths recognizable within Japanese society's historical evolution. The focus on a teacher-student misunderstanding echoes national debates about education reform, child welfare, and social conformity. These are not abstract issues. They have deep historical roots in Japan's post-war identity as a nation balancing individual emotion against collective order. By staging his drama within a school, Koreeda symbolically revisits the moral tension that has long defined Japan's cultural narrative, the struggle between personal truth and societal expectation. In this context, Monster also becomes a film about memory, how societies remember and reinterpret truth. The repetition of scenes from different perspectives mirrors how history itself is revised, misremembered, or retold depending on who holds the power to narrate. Koreeda, always a subtle historian of human emotion, uses this device to suggest that truth is never absolute, whether in personal relationships or in collective memory. This gives Monster an implicit historical commentary on how judgment operates within communities and nations alike. Internationally, Monster's historical context extends to how Japanese cinema continues to influence global storytelling. Its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival and subsequent acclaim reaffirmed Japan's place as a source of emotionally intelligent filmmaking. The film's universal message, about empathy, misunderstanding, and the danger of quick moral labeling, transcends national borders, yet its quiet precision remains rooted in Japanese narrative tradition. Ultimately, Monster 2022's place in historical context lies in its synthesis of old and new. It honors Japan's cinematic past through structure and tone while addressing modern social realities that resonate globally. Though not a franchise, it belongs to an artistic continuum, a living history of filmmakers using empathy to question truth. By weaving its story through layers of perception and cultural reflection, Monster becomes not just a film about individuals but a study of how societies see, judge, and heal. Monster 2022, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, stands as a prime example of how a film can achieve emotional depth, visual sophistication, and narrative complexity without relying on blockbuster-level spending. The film's reported production budget was modest by Hollywood standards, estimated between $5 and $10 million, a figure consistent with Koreeda's history of producing thoughtful, character-driven dramas. Every dollar is visible on screen, not in the form of grand visual effects or elaborate set pieces, but through the precision of its craft, its authentic locations, careful lighting design, and understated production detail. Unlike mainstream action or fantasy releases, Monster channels its resources towards storytelling integrity, performances, and aesthetic subtlety. This gives the film a richness that belies its moderate cost. The film's value lies not in spectacle but in atmosphere. Koreeda and his team, including cinematographer Ryuto Kondo and production designer Keiko Mitsumatsu, utilize natural settings and minimalist interiors to create a world that feels lived in and emotionally credible. Instead of building expensive studio sets, much of the film was shot in real Japanese suburban environments, which lends both authenticity and cost efficiency. The production team focused on environmental realism, homes that feel functional rather than stylized, classrooms that resemble real schools, and landscapes that reflect Japan's understated beauty. This grounded approach not only saves money but also reinforces the film's thematic intent, allowing the audience to immerse themselves in the emotional truth of the story rather than the artifice of production design. One of the strengths of Monster's financial execution is how it stretches limited resources to create cinematic depth. Koreeda is known for preferring practical lighting, long takes, and restrained camera movement, all techniques that reduce production costs while increasing artistic resonance. The film's subtle use of visual motifs, such as reflections and recurring natural imagery, shows that creative imagination can replace expensive effects. The emotional and thematic layers are delivered through performance and atmosphere rather than visual excess, proving that cinematic power does not depend on budget size but on narrative clarity and direction. When it comes to marketing and box office, Monster's release strategy followed the pattern typical of art-house international films. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2023, a calculated move designed to build prestige and critical buzz before general release. The festival circuit exposure positioned it as a high-caliber drama and generated strong word-of-mouth among global critics. This strategy is particularly important for films like Monster, which depend on cultural credibility and audience trust rather than mass-market advertising. Koreeda's reputation, combined with the film's Palme d'Or competition slot and subsequent Best Screenplay win for Yuji Sakamoto, elevated its visibility across international markets. After its festival run, Monster performed consistently well in limited theatrical release, especially in Japan, France, and South Korea. The film's domestic box office exceeded expectations for a character-driven drama, grossing the equivalent of several million USD in Japan alone. While this number may appear small compared to blockbuster earnings, it represents a strong return relative to production cost and genre expectations. The film's slow-burn success mirrored the trajectory of Koreeda's previous works such as Shoplifters, which also gained momentum through international acclaim rather than aggressive marketing campaigns. Monster's global rollout was further supported by targeted marketing through cultural partnerships, film institutes, and streaming distributors specializing in international cinema. In North America and Europe, the film found its primary audience among festival-goers, critics, and enthusiasts of world cinema. Its limited theatrical run in art-house venues contributed modest but steady box office income, while its eventual release on streaming platforms extended its life cycle. For a film like Monster, the long-term financial performance is measured less by opening weekend revenue and more by longevity, how it sustains interest through critical discussion, awards attention, and online availability. The financial impact of awards recognition also played a role in Monster's profitability. Its Cannes win and subsequent nominations at various international film awards increased its visibility, boosting post-theatrical sales, licensing deals, and global distribution. Such recognition often leads to streaming acquisitions that can significantly multiply revenue, particularly in territories like the United States and Europe, where demand for critically acclaimed international films remains strong. Koreeda's growing international reputation as one of Japan's foremost contemporary directors helped guarantee these deals and ensure that Monster reached a wide range of audiences beyond Japan. Compared to major Hollywood productions that spend tens or even hundreds of millions on marketing alone, Monster's promotional campaign was intentionally modest but strategic. The emphasis was on artistic merit and emotional engagement rather than high-budget advertising. Interviews with Koreeda, behind-the-scenes features, and critical essays served as the main vehicles for awareness. This approach appeals to audiences seeking authenticity and depth, not spectacle, making Monster a financial success relative to its ambitions. In financial terms, Monster can be classified as a mid-budget art film that achieved above-average returns within its market segment. Its revenue from box office, streaming, and festival-related licensing comfortably surpassed its production and distribution costs. Moreover, its intangible gains, critical acclaim, audience goodwill, and brand enhancement for Koreeda's future projects represent long-term value that extends beyond immediate profit. The film's understated yet deliberate use of resources demonstrates that emotional resonance can yield both artistic and commercial success without extravagance. In conclusion, Monster 2022 exemplifies efficient, intelligent filmmaking that maximizes artistic value within a reasonable budget. It looks more expensive than it actually is because every creative decision serves the narrative rather than spectacle. Its financial success reflects how powerful word of mouth, festival acclaim, and craftsmanship can drive profitability in the global arthouse market. Monster did not need blockbuster spending to make an impact. It needed vision, discipline, and emotional honesty, all of which translated into a quietly remarkable box office and long-lasting audience engagement. Monster 2022, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, is a film best experienced in a setting that allows viewers to absorb its quiet emotional rhythms, subtle visual cues, and layered performances without distraction. The way you watch this film can deeply affect how its mood and meaning reach you. Whether you prefer the immersive power of a theater or the intimacy of home viewing, understanding the film's tone and technical design will help you choose the best format for your experience. When Monster was first released, it had a theatrical rollout primarily across Japan and select international markets, often premiering in art house cinemas and specialty theaters known for screening foreign language films. Watching it in theaters offers the richest experience. The large screen captures Ryuto Kondo's cinematography in its full visual texture. The soft lighting, the shifting tones of gray and gold, and the quiet framing of domestic spaces that carry emotional resonance. The wide canvas allows you to appreciate the symmetry and compositional choices that reinforce the story's themes of perception and misunderstanding. Koreeda's direction thrives on subtle visual storytelling, and seeing it projected in full resolution helps audiences notice the delicate movements of the camera and the way light changes within scenes. The film's sound design also benefits from a theater environment. Composer Ryuichi Sakamoto's haunting score, his final work before his passing, deserves to be heard in high-quality surround sound. The music alternates between gentle piano motifs and moments of stillness, and the theater's acoustics preserve the balance between silence and sound that gives Monster its emotional pulse. The quiet scenes, the distant footsteps, the hum of school hallways, the faint rustle of wind, gain weight in a controlled sound space. If you can catch Monster at a repertory screening, film festival showcase, or limited theatrical re-release, that experience will bring out the film's sensory and emotional subtleties in ways home viewing rarely can. For most viewers, however, Monster 2022 will be discovered through home viewing on streaming or rental platforms. The film's tone and pacing make it particularly well-suited to this format. Koreeda's storytelling invites contemplation, and watching at home allows you to pause, reflect, and even revisit key scenes. Monster's narrative structure, told through shifting perspectives, rewards attention to detail, and a personal viewing setting encourages that kind of focus. It is best watched in a quiet, dimly lit room with minimal distractions, preferably using good quality speakers or headphones to appreciate the fine sound layering. The streaming version retains the high-definition visual quality that showcases Kondo's cinematography, ensuring the contrast between interior warmth and exterior chill remains intact. Many U.S. audiences encountered Monster through international film platforms and digital rentals that specialize in festival and independent cinema. Subtitled releases maintain the film's authenticity, preserving the nuances of Yuji Sakamoto's original dialogue. If you are watching with subtitles, it is recommended to keep the screen at eye level and avoid small devices like phones or tablets that can diminish readability and visual immersion. The film's emotional power lies in subtle facial expressions, body language, and framing, all of which are easier to appreciate on a medium or large display. In terms of viewing context, Monster is not a casual background film. It rewards patience and attention. The story's slow unfolding invites emotional investment and introspection. The best approach is to treat the film as an event. Set aside time when you can fully engage with it. Watching with headphones enhances the sense of intimacy and connection with the characters. The ambient sounds of classrooms, rain, and daily life are integral to the film's emotional rhythm. The restrained performances of Ando Sakura, Nagayama Ida, and the two young actors, Kirikawa Soya and Hiragi Hinata, come alive in their smallest gestures and pauses, which can easily be missed without careful listening. For audiences who appreciate emotional realism and human-centered storytelling, Monster is worth owning or revisiting. Rewatching deepens appreciation because the film's perspective shifts reveal new information each time. What initially seems like mystery later unfolds into empathy, and details that appeared minor gain emotional weight upon second viewing. Home release editions often include interviews or behind-the-scenes insights from Koreeda and the cast, which add further depth for film enthusiasts. Those interested in exploring the craft of storytelling and cinematography will find the rewatchability of Monster exceptionally rewarding. In comparison to big-screen spectacle-driven films, Monster 2022 relies more on quiet power than visual grandeur. That means the film translates well to home viewing without losing much impact. However, if you have the chance to view it in a well-calibrated home theater setup, that combination, large display, surround sound, and controlled lighting, comes close to replicating the theatrical experience. The subtle soundscape, the deliberate camera compositions, and Sakamoto's delicate score all benefit from a quality playback environment. For the U.S. audience, the viewing decision ultimately comes down to preference. If you value total immersion and cinematic atmosphere, seek out a theatrical showing or festival screening. If you prefer reflection, privacy, and the ability to absorb the story's emotion at your own pace, a quiet home watch is ideal. Monster is a film about perception, misunderstanding, and compassion. It grows in meaning the more you think about it, making it equally effective in both public and personal settings. In the end, Monster 2022 is best experienced wherever you can give it your full attention. Whether you watch it on a large screen or in your living room, approach it with focus and patience. It is not a film to rush through but one to feel. Every visual frame, every silence, every note of Sakamoto's score contributes to an atmosphere that lingers long after the credits fade. For American audiences who appreciate emotionally layered cinema, Monster is a film that rewards presence. It does not demand spectacle but asks for empathy, and that makes it powerful in any viewing space. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.